I've got more rad pirate flags just painting shadows on the skulls right now, and I'm real happy with them. I think they look pretty freaking cool, man. This is the fun part. This is the dessert. It was days and days of sewing, sewing hems and stitching bones on. This is weird. I'm looking at myself in the camera reflection. How do you do this though? Which way do I go? If I want to go down, that's down. So how about that? Oh, look at that. So down. So I had to stitch along these edges. And anyway, there's a whole bunch of tedium, cool stuff, but necessary. And I laid a good foundation. And now I'm getting into the painting part, which is just shading it, and we're really getting piratey with it. And they're starting to look pretty cool. So here we are. So I'm going to carry on in a few minutes. I'm going to be doing some shadows on this side of the skull, and we're really just kind of rounding them out and making it look rad. So it looks pretty cool. Like if I was an 18th century pirate, I think I would not balk at flying this from my mizzenmast. So here we go. I think I'm going to post this one up and see if we can get some action. We'll go to Twitter. I'm going to go to Facebook. I'm going to go. Had some friends in earlier. It was, I think, the most fun I've ever had on a stream. I had 6 people in at once. I had a couple of friends in, and they were chatting, and we had a good old time, and it was cool. So I'm starting to get the hang of this thing, and I like it. So the more the merrier. I'm glad for everybody who drops in.
Found him and beat and threw him overboard. 7 days afterwards, upon his objecting against and refusing to sign their articles, he was cut and abused again.
What I'm looking for now is, where do I post? I never know where to post, like how to post something on X.
The shares they had given him, having been from time to time,
like where's the blue post button? More pirate skulls and bones. Live stream now.
At making his escape in the West Indies, and with 2 more sentenced to be shot for it by a drunken jury. The latter actually suffered, and he was preserved
only by
one of the chief pirates taking a sudden liking to him.
Give me the weed, dog. We got the weed. Give me a link. Give me the link. A good pirate link. Let's post it up.
After 2 or 3 days wandering to return towards the ship again, denying with egregious oaths the design he was charged with for fear they would shoot him.
And now let's find the other one.
Of his fault that most of the acquitted prisoners had witnessed. They entertained
I'm going to even go to Fasaduk.
would not admit him into his secrets, and with all that Captain Carey and 4 other prisoners with him had made affidavit of his having been forced from his employ, which though he could not produce, yet he humbly hoped the court would think highly probable from the circumstances offered. On the whole, the court was of opinion artists had the best pretension to the plea of force, from the necessity pirates are sometimes under of engaging such, and that many parts of his own defense had been confirmed by the evidence, who had asserted he acted with reluctance, and had expressed a concern and trouble for the little hopes remained to him of extricating himself. That he had used all prisoners, as they were called, well, at the hazard of ill usage to himself, that he had not, in any military capacity, assisted their robberies, that he had twice endeavored his escape with the utmost danger. Acquitted him. Captain James Skirm. It appeared from the evidence of several prisoners acquitted that this Skirm
Dang, I don't know.
in that defense she made against the king's ship, that he ordered the men to their quarters and the guns to be
No,
we
must have the link.
Commands, and beat such to their duty whom he espied any way negligent or backward, that although he had lost a leg in the action, his temper was so warm as to refuse going off the deck till he found all was lost.
post it.
when that sloop
There we
was
go.
dismissed.
I'm not concerned with the niceties of capitalization and punctuation and
He
stuff.
had really for several months past been
The
sick
fuck is
and
this?
disqualified for any duty.
Do I know this person? I have no freaking idea. Who is this?
The title of captain gave
Why do they make it impossible to see if this guy has a profile? Why can't I see this dude's profile? I don't know who the hell this is.
perceived it to be the king's ship. The sickness he
I don't know who that is.
especially the
You can
circumstance
buzz off,
of
dude.
losing his leg, were aggravations of his fault, showing him more alert on such occasions that he was now willing to be thought. As to the name of captain, if it were allowed to give him no precedence out of battle, yet here it was proved a title of authority, such an authority as could direct an engagement against the king's colors, and therefore he was in the highest degree guilty.
Jeff King. I knew a guy named Jeff King. Is this the same guy? No, but this dude's wearing a hunting shirt, so he's good people.
Chapter 9, Part 11 of the General History of the Pirates, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more
Sure, he wears a hunting shirt. He can't be all
please
bad.
visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Barry Eads.
Oh,
The General History of the Pirates,
go.
Volume
All right.
1 by Charles Johnson.
What else?
Chapter 9, Part 11. John Walden. Captain John Traherne and George Fenn deposed the prisoner to be one
All right.
of the number.
Let's paint
who in
some
open
pirate flags.
erratically assailed and took their ship, and was remarkably busy at mischief.
Give me the pirate, the good pirate.
Him instead of a key to all the locked
Give me the
doors
skull
and
and
boxes
goes
he came nigh.
So what do you call it?
Also,
The
in
death.
particular, he cut the
It's a
cable
black
of our
flag
ship,
with a death
while the
upon
other
it.
pirates were willing
That's how they described it in
busy
that
and
earlier
heaving up the
thing,
anchor,
Rick.
saying captain, which signifies the
Let us proceed.
struggle and straining in high
Draw behind a pirate flag, mother.
more anchors at London, and besides, your
Right.
ship is to be burned.
Don't burn the ship, you
Prisoners
douche.
acquitted, says Walden was known among
Don't
the pirates
burn
as
the ships. We need the
his
ships.
name.
We in the 21st century wish to have more of these ships available. Don't destroy them, you dirty rats.
After the Swallow, and by a shot from that ship lost his leg.
All right.
His behavior in the
Quit
fight
smoke.
proved to have been
Carry on painting.
daring. The
I'm
president called
pretty
for Harry Glasgow
freaking happy
and
with
made
you,
him
man.
really
These
a
look great.
character.
Even in person, they look good in the photo.
In relation to these
They look good
voluntary
there.
expeditions
And there.
out of their proper ship, and this of
They
course
look good there and there.
Ranger in particular.
And they look good
And
here
gave
in
him
person.
evidence that the prisoner was looked on
So,
as a brisk hand.
what I wish to do
As he
now
further
is
explained it, a staunch pirate, a great rogue, that when the Swallow first appeared in sight, everyone was willing to
Well,
believe her a
I'm going to carry on.
because sugar was
Now I
here.
want to shade the left side of the
Some
skulls.
jarring and dissension between the two
And then
companies.
after that,
The
I'm going to go
fortunes
in
of
with
people
some,
drinking punch
I'm going to mix up a
Rangers
new
could not.
glaze,
That Roberts, on sight of the Swallow,
slightly
killed the
thin,
new Ranger
and go in,
bid
but
them
just a
right
little
ship
bit blacker.
get under
And we're going to
sail.
go in and put some
There is,
depth
says he,
into
sugar
these
and
shadows.
Bring it in.
Like, it doesn't need a lot,
No more
just
movement.
enough to
Already
really
at the
just
same
punch it.
time, the word to be
It'll make these things pop. They're going to look really, really good.
and immediately
But they look great in the photo. I think they look better in the photo than they do in person. I'm pretty pleased with them in real life here.
Any prize does it voluntarily,
Like
or were there here any
I
other
like
reasons for it? H. Glasgow.
that.
Every man is
And I
commonly
like-
called by list and insists in his turn to go on board of a prize, because they then are allowed a shift of clothes.
Not that way.
The best they
That
can
way.
find.
I like
over
that.
And above
And
the
I like
dividend
that.
from the robbery. And
They
this
look
they were
good.
so far from being
So we're going to
compelled
carry on and do
that it
more of
often
that.
becomes the occasion of contest and quarrel amongst them. But in the present or such like cases where there appears a prospect of trouble, the lazy and amorous are
I
often
need some rock and roll, I
and
think.
yield to their betters.
Dun, 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 dun,
Thereby
dun,
establishing
dun,
a
dun,
greater
dun.
credit. The prisoner and the rest of those men who worked from the fortune on board the Ranger to assist in this expedition
Pirate
were
flag.
volunteers
Put
and the
down.
trustiest men among us.
Hey, we should listen to No Quarter.
Were there no jealousies
Like, that won't
of the
totally
Ranger's
get me a
leading in
copyright
this chase,
restriction on
or
my
at
video.
any other time in order to
So we're
surrender?
going to listen to it anyway.
H.
Not here,
Glasgow.
though. You can
Most
imagine
of
it.
the Ranger's crew were fresh
All right,
men,
so
men who had
we got
been injured only since
got
their
this
home
shading
on the
in.
coast of Guinea,
We need more.
and therefore had not so liberal a share in fresh
Dun,
provisions
dun,
or
dun,
wine
dun,
as the Fortunes' people, who thought they had borne the burthen and heat of the day, which had given occasion indeed to some grumblings and whispers, as though they would take an opportunity to leave us, but we never supposed, if they did,
Oh, you know what? So there are places on here where it's slightly darker. So when I do the black, I'm going to do maybe not absolute black, but it's going to be a shade darker than the stuff that's currently there. I'm going to go a bit darker into the where the optic nerve is, the top of the nose cavity, the teeth, and then we're going to go also on the bones, wherever there is that deepest line. So I want to make a complete pass, top to bottom, everywhere that gets a little bit blacker. There oughtn't be much of it. This should be just kind of subtle, but it's going to go all over. I mean, even the lower one looks cool too. Let's drop it down a bit and you can see that. Like, don't they look cool? Right? Like that's pretty rad. These are pretty awesome. Makes me want to get a sloop, fit her out, and go a pirating. Okay. I think I want to get a sloop and fit her out and go a pirating.
And being asked that supposing the chase had proved to Portuguese, why then, says he, I don't know what I might have done, intimating withal that everybody then would have been ready enough at plundering. Guilty. Peter Scudamore, Harry Glassby, Joe Wingfield, and Nicholas Brattle deposed thus much as to his being a volunteer with the pirates from Captain Rolls at Calabar. First, that he quarreled with Moody, one of the heads of the gang, and fought with him because he opposed his going, asking Rolls in a leering manner whether he would not be so kind as to put him into the Gazette when he came home. And at another time,
asked him in a leering manner. Love the way they describe this.
The rascal may be drowned, for he is a great rogue and has endeavored to do me all the ill offices he could among these gentlemen, i.e. pirates. And secondly, that he had signed the pirates' articles with a great deal
of pirates' articles.
And gloried in having been the first surgeon that had done so. For before this, it was their
you know what? And this is
their
even
surgeons when they
drying
desired,
nicely
after
too.
having
These are so
served their
freaking
time,
cool.
and never obliged them to sign. But he was resolved to break through this for the good
Golly,
of
they're
those
cool.
who were to follow. Swearing immediately upon it, he was now, he hoped,
Oh,
as
did you
great a
find the
rogue
teeth
as
there?
any of them. Captain Joe Traherne and George Fenn, his mate, deposed the prisoner to have taken out of the King Solomon their surgeon's capital instruments, some medicines, and a backgammon table, which later became the means of a quarrel between one Wincott and he whose property they should be, and were yielded to the prisoner.
Pretty cool.
Joe Sharp, master of the Elizabeth, heard the prisoner ask
The pirate flags are pretty rad. So we're not going to go much darker than this. I like this. I like it as it is very much. We're going to go a bit darker just to define and start sharpening it up. But, I like the tone of the shading on the bones and skulls as compared to the field. So camera text off. There we go. Okay, so we're good to go. So I'm gonna just sit for a minute, take a rest, take my ease, and there's nobody else here, so it doesn't make any difference. If you want to show up, if you say something in chat, I will certainly jump to.
Received many civilities from him before meeting with the pirates. He yet understood it was through his and Scudamore's means that he had been compelled among them.
Yep, I agree with you, Danny boy.
He says, at meeting with
Oh,
Robert,
Danny boy, the pipes are calling.
more presently,
From
borrowing
glen to
a
glen,
clean shirt and drawers for his better appearance and reception.
and down the mountainside.
And used arguments with him to do the same, saying they should make their voyage in 8 months to Brazil, share 600 or 700 per a man, and then break up. Again, when the crew came to an election of a chief surgeon, and this deponent was set up with the others, Wilson told him he hoped he should carry it from Scudamore, for that a quarter share, which they had more than others, would be worth looking after. But the deponent missed the preservement by the goodwill of the Rangers' people, who in general voted for Scudamore, to get rid of him. that he seemed thoroughly satisfied with that way of life, and was particularly intimate with Roberts, they often scoffing at the mention of a man of war, and saying, if they should meet with any of the Turnip's men's ships, they would blow up and go to hell together. Yet setting aside these silly freaks to recommend himself, his laziness had got him many enemies. Even Roberts told him, on the complaint of a wounded man whom he had refused to dress, that he was a double rogue, to be there a second time, and threatened to cut his ears off. The evidence further assured the court, from Captain Thomas Tarleton, that the prisoner was taken out of his brother's ship some months before, and Ford, to oblige his new company, had presently asked for the pirate's boat to fetch the medicine chest away. When the wind and current proving too hard to contend with, they were drove on shore at Cape Montserrat. The prisoner called for William Darling and Samuel Morwell, acquitted, and Nicholas Butler. William Darling deposed the first time the prisoner fell into their hands. Roberts mistook him for Job Tarleton, the master, and being informed it was the surgeon who came to represent him, then indisposed, he presently swore he should be his messmate, to which Wilson replied, he hoped not, he had a wife and child, which the other laughed at, and that he had been 2 days on board before he went in that boat, which was drove on shore at Cape Montserrat, and at his second coming in the Elizabeth, he heard Robert's order he should be.
Here we go, you fine and dandy people.
Says that he has heard him bewail his condition while on board the pirate, and desired one Thomas to use his interest with Roberts for a discharge.
I had one of the best streams I've ever had earlier, and I was very pleased to have it. I'm glad for everybody who joined. Thank you all. Alright, so I'm going to sit here for just another minute or two, a couple minutes, and then we're going to carry on and shade more, and then tighten up the, I think I'm going to tighten up the teeth, the nose, the orbits, the optic nerves, and then a little bit in the bones, the long bones. We don't have a whole lot to do left here. These are nearly done. We're almost done with this. And they look awesome. I'm pleased with them now.
That he could like the sport were it lawful, and whether if he had not told him, should the company discharge any surgeon, that he would insist on it as his turn. The deponent yes to every question separately, and farther,
that he cool, man.
Scudamore had not seen Wilson when he first came and found him out of the Elizabeth. He added in his own defense, that being surgeon with one John Tarleton of Liverpool, he was met a first time on this coast of Guinea by Roberts the pirate, who, after a day or two, told him to his sorrow that he was to stay there, and ordered him to fetch his chest, not medicines as asserted, which opportunity he took to make his escape, for the boat's crew happening to consist of 5 French and 1 Englishman, all as willing as himself, they agreed to push the boat on shore and trust themselves with the negroes of Cape Montserrat. Hazardous not only in respect of the dangerous seas that run there, but the inhumanity of the natives, who sometimes take a liking to human carcasses. Here he remained 5 months, till Thomas Tarleton, brother to his captain, chanced to put in the road for trade, to whom he represented his hardships and starving condition, but was, in an unchristian manner, both refused to be released of this captivity, or so much as a small supply of biscuit and salt meat, because, as he said, he had been among the pirates. A little time after this, the master of a French ship paid a ransom for him and took him off. But, by reason of a nasty leprous indisposition he had contracted by hard and bad living, was, to his great misfortune, set ashore at Sestos again, when Captain Sharp met him, and generously procured his release in the manner himself has related, and for which he stands infinitely obliged. That ill luck threw him a second time into the pirates' hands in this ship Elizabeth, where he met Thomas Tarleton, and thoughtlessly used some reproaches of him for his severe treatment at Montserrat, but protests without design his words should have had so bad a consequence. For Roberts took upon him, as a dispenser of justice, the correction of Mr. Tarleton, beating him unmercifully, and he hopes that will be contrary to any intention of his that should so happen, because as the
more shading.
might be supposed to have no influence, and believes there were some other motives for He could not remember he expressed himself glad to see Roberts the second time, or that he dropped those expressions.
Welcome to the stream. I see somebody's joined. You're here in time. We're just about to start shading again. Painting skulls. We're almost done with the pirate flags. So glad you're here. I'm sure you are. I'm going to cover the camera just so you don't get seasick. I'm going to adjust the angle. There you go. How about that? You're welcome. Does that do it? Sure, why not? Okay, so I'm going to put the mouse away. I need to bring up my... Okay, so we have camera. Okay, that's good. I'm going to bring up my reference image so you can see the camera and I can see the reference. And I'm just going to start painting. So I've done this stuff. I need now to roughly a triangle in here.
Because the Commodore of the Swallow had declared the first notice he received of this design of the pirates to rise was from him.
Here.
End of chapter 9, part 11.
Toward here. So, right, so there. And then
Chapter 9,
we don't
part
want to
12.
go quite to the edge there. Just fill this in. How about that?
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain.
We are listening to a general history of the pirates from about 1728. It is an account of the piracies and depredations that were taking place in the golden age of piracy.
Part 12. Benjamin Jeffries.
There we go. So that triangle. Anything else or just this stuff? What do I want to do? What I'm trying to do is evenly distribute the shading around all of the things. I think, you know what, I'm going to do that triangle. You know what, I'm just going to stick with that. I'm going to do all of that triangle, just that side right there. Then we'll go on to the next thing. I like to be able to keep this fairly simple, just whatever I can keep in mind.
The deponents further say that at Sierra Leone, every man had more especially the
Right,
means
we're
of
just
escaping,
going here,
and that this
down
prisoner
here,
in particular neglected it, and came off from that
and
place after their ship was
see
under
this
sail,
line,
going
so it
out to
goes
the river.
kind of like right here.
The prisoner in his defence protests he was at first forced, and that the office of boatswain's mate was imposed on him, and what he would have been glad to have
Dude, he's a boatswain's mate. He's an active pirate.
From the pirates at first was for telling them that none who could get their bread in an honest way would be on such an account. And he had certainly taken the opportunity which presented at Sierra Leone of ridding himself from so distasteful a life if there had not been 3 or 4 of the old pirates on shore at the same time who, he imagined, must know of him. And would doubtless have served him the same, if not worse, than they since had done Williams, who, for such a design, being delivered up by the treacherous natives, had received 2 lashes through the whole ship's company. The court observed the excuses of these pirates about want of means to escape was oftentimes as poor and evasive as their pleas of being forced at first, for here, at Sierra Leone, every man had his liberty on shore, and it was evident might have kept it if he or they had so pleased. And such are further culpable, who, having been introduced into the society by such civil methods as whipping or beating, neglect less likely means of regaining liberty. It shows strong inclinations to dishonesty, and they stand inexcusably guilty. John Mansfield, it was proved against this prisoner by Captain Traherne and George Fair that he was one of those volunteers who was at the attack and robbery of the company's ship called the King Solomon. That he bullied well among them who dared not make any reply, but was very easy with his friends who knew him. For Moody, on this occasion, took a large glass
War without end.
From an island called Dominica in the West Indies, and had to recommend himself, told them, he was a deserter from the Rose man of war, and before that had been on the highway. He was always drunk, they said, and so bad at the time they met with this woman.
Okay, there you go. There's another one. Carry on. Keep going. We're painting pirate flags. We're making them. We're throwing out the glad rags. These terrifying death's heads. Play. Damn it. I need more stories of piracy and depredation. So we're almost to the point where this shading is done. I still want to do along the left side. We're still doing these triangles here. This goes here, and then this triangle here.
Colors to know who would go on board the prize. And it was
Sounds like a backing alarm, and I thought it might be here in the real world, which would have been unusual since it's in the middle of the night. But I think it's actually in the background of her as she's recording.
That had too great a share in ensnaring him into this course of life, and had been a greater motive with him than gold. Guilty.
Oh, he's guilty. He's cooked, man. You're not getting out of this one,
William
bud.
Allen deposed he knew this prisoner at Sierra Leone,
Whew.
to the Anne Galley,
Right.
that he had a quarrel with,
There you
and
go.
beat the mate of that ship, for which, as he said,
Now, let's do the
he was
filtrum.
to return to his
Right?
duty.
While we're here, let's just do the filtrum. So we're just going straight down and then over and up.
He received a wife, and ungratefully sold her one evening. for
Don't sell your wife.
his thirst.
It's rude.
After this, having put himself under the protection of Mr. Plunkett, governor there for the Royal African
Mr. Plunkett from Red Letter
the
Media.
relations and friends of the woman applied to him for redress, who immediately surrendered the prisoner and told them he did not care if they took his head off. But the Negroes, wisely judging it would not fetch so good a price, they sold him in his turn again to Senor Jose, a Christian black and native of that
Well,
place, who expected
you know, you kind of brought it on yourself, Dan.
from him on
Don't try to sell your
consideration
wife.
first
Let that be a lesson to you.
But long
Dummy.
before the expiration of this time, Roberts came in to see
Roberts.
where the prisoner, as Senor Jose assured the deponent, entered a volunteer with them. The deponent further corroborated this part.
Corroborate.
In that, he being obliged to call at Cape Mount in his passage down hither, met there with 2 deserters from Roberts' ship, who assured him of the same, and that the pirates did design to turn Davis away the next opportunity as an idle, good-for-nothing fellow. From Glasgow and
There you go.
it was
Next.
that every
Carrying
pirate,
on.
while they stayed at sea,
Carrying on, carrying on, carrying on. We're painting pirate flags.
Roberts had often
And then we're going on the account. We're going to seek our fortune on the sea.
body and ensured there was no occasion for it. In particular, the prisoner's roommate went away and thinks he might have done the same if he had pleased. The prisoner alleged his having been detained against his will and says that returning with elephant's teeth for Sierra Leone, the pirate's boat pursued and brought him on board, where he was kept on account of his understanding the pilotage and navigation of that river. It was obvious to the court not only how frivolous excuses of constraint and force were among these people at their first commencing pirates, but also it was plain to them
Yo.
that these 2 deserters
Look around
came
and do the other
and
side.
discretional man
We're doing
led
filtrums
Sierra
now,
Leone
which is
through
that
how
little
little
space
people
below the
several
nose above the
did and
lips.
others might have escaped afterwards if they could but have obtained their own consents for it.
Aha! If they could have obtained their own
This is the
consent.
substance of the trials of Roberts's crew,
If
which
could have
may
obtained,
suffice for
but
others that occur
if you could but have obtained your own consent, you might have become an honest man again.
Who were condemned. Those names with a cross were referred for trial to the Marshalsea, and all the rest were acquitted. The following pirates were executed.
Dang! Don't get executed, dude.
Of Cape Corso Castle.
'Tis a short life, but a merry one.
There now follows
Your
a list
goose
of
is
all
cooked.
pirates who were executed.
There you go.
Gives their names, their age, and their origin. William Magnus,
All right.
35.
Time, I think, to make some new
Richard
paint.
Hardy, 25, from Wales.
So I've done that one,
David Simpson, 36,
right?
North Berwick.
And that one.
Christopher
That's
Murphy,
done.
28,
How about
Easton
this? Tis done? Yes?
Thomas
No.
Sutton, 23.
Here's the last one. 23 years old and
32.
damn, dude.
Peter Devine,
Tis
42.
a rough, tough life of toil and strife we pirate men undergo.
Philip Bill, 27, St. Thomas's. William May, 28, origin unknown. William McIntosh, 21, Captain. William Williams, 40, Knight Plymouth. Robert Hawes,
He's from Nye Lancaster.
Robert Crowe, 44, from the Isle of Man. Michael Mayer.
There you go. All right, so that's done.
Daniel Hart,
Next
27,
is,
Cruisbury,
now
Sussex.
I need some more of this, so I'm going to have to mix up another glaze.
Jonathan Moore,
Now, how much of this do I need? Well, you know, it looks like some goes across the top of the skull. It's so weird, man.
Jonathan Parker, 22, Whitford in Dorsetshire.
The shading on this is so weird. Like, the skull seems to be shaded differently than
James Clement, age 20, Jersey.
the body of the thing. But, you know, I mean, that's just how it is, you know?
James Skin, 44,
Right.
Wales.
It is.
John Walton, 24, Somersetshire.
Oof. All right.
Stephen,
Well,
40, Whitby. Jonathan
right,
Hanson,
hang these.
30, from the Orkneys. Israel Hines,
we're going to hang
age
these,
30,
and then we're
Bristol.
going to look at them.
Peter Leslie, 21.
Because I think, well, I really want to start doing black, like deeper,
Robert Burns,
deeper
age
shade.
30.
I think really kind of need to be where they are.
Richard
You know, I
Harris,
don't want to go much
45,
darker.
Cornwall.
However,
26, from Sudbury in Devonshire. William Williams, age 30, speechless at execution. Alge Jacobsen, 30, from Holland. Benjamin
No,
Davies,
no, no,
21,
damn it.
Bristol. Cuthbert Goss, 21,
can
Topsy.
you hold up there?
John
Okay.
Jessup, 20.
Maybe I need fresh tape.
Edward Watts, 22, Dunbar. Thomas Giles, 26, Minehead. William Wood, age 27, York. Thomas Armstrong, age 34, from London.
There's that.
Executed on board the Weymouth.
Okay.
Robert Johnson, 32, and Wider. George Smith, 25, Wales. William Watts, 23, from Ireland. James Phillips, 35, Antigua. John Coleman, 24, from Wales. Robert Hayes, 20, Liverpool. William Davis, 23, Wales. The remainder of the pirates.
So let's try this. See how she looks.
Upon their humble
How do they look?
had their sentence changed
They look pretty good.
to 7 years servitude conformable to our
The shading is weird though.
The
And
petition is as
the
follows.
original shading, I mean,
To
looks
the
weird.
Honourable, the President and Judges
It looks
of
to
the
me
Court
like
of
the
Appeal,
shading on the skull
the
comes
trial
from
of
the upper
Pirates
left,
City,
and the shading on the
also
bones comes from the
20th
right.
day of April, 1722.
Maybe the upper right. It's
The
odd.
humble petition of Thomas Howe, Samuel Fletcher, etc.
Strange, strange,
Happily
strange.
showeth
But
that your petitioners
now we're
being
doing it.
unhappily and unwarily drawn into that wretched and detestable crime of piracy, for which they now stand
I need
justly
another
condemned,
run
they
of
most humbly
thin
pray the
glaze.
clemency of the court in the mitigation of their sentence, that they may be permitted to serve the Royal African Company of England in this country for 7 years, in
Yeah,
such a manner
I need
as
another
to
run of
ensure
thin glaze,
that by their just
because we have to do the left
being
side
made
and the
sensible of
top.
error of their former ways, they will for the future become faithful
Yeah, it looks to me like
good servants,
the skull is lit from the left and the bones are lit.
the Almighty, to
Is there a
prolong
symbol in
lives.
that? What does that mean?
And your petition
Because the skull is lit from the left, the
resolution
bones
of the
are
court
lit from the right.
that the petitioners have leave by this Court of Admiralty
That's really
to
weird. What does that
interchange
mean?
indentures with the Captain General of the Gold Coast for the
Why
Royal
is
African
that?
Company for 7 years servitude at any of the
That doesn't
Royal
make
African
sense to
Company
me, but
settlements
why
in
is it?
Africa in such a manner
That's
as
undeniably
said
what's
Captain
going on.
General shall think proper. On Thursday the 26th
Why
of
is that?
April, the indentures being all drawn out according to the grant made to the petitioners by the court held on Friday the 20th.
Why
of
is
this
that like
instant.
that? That's so weird.
Each prisoner was sent
Huh.
up, signed,
I don't know
sealed,
why
and
they do that.
exchanged them in the presence of
I hadn't noticed that
Captain
before.
Royal
I mean, I was looking at it and,
James Phipps,
like, you know, I'm thinking about it and stuff,
Esquire.
but why is that? Why do they have that? But that's undeniably what's going on.
Register.
You can just look at the, let me pull this up.
The
Look at this
indenture of a
image.
person condemned
Can you
to
see
serve
that?
abroad
No, you
for
can't,
piracy,
because I don't have
which,
it.
upon the
Yeah,
humble
let's,
petition of the pirates therein
Let me shrink
mentioned,
this.
was most mercifully granted by His Imperial Majesty's commissioners and judges appointed
Right?
to hold
If you look at these,
for the trial
why
of
are they
pirates
lit
Cape Corso Castle
in that way?
Africa, upon
Why
the
is it that
condition
the-
of serving 7 years
let's go
under
to the,
conditions
let's
as
bring this
follows.
image up.
This indenture made the 26th
Why is it
of April,
that the
anno
skull is lit from the left and the bones are lit from the right? Why?
Septimo Domini Millis.
What do they mean by that? I mean, things, it's not necessarily accidental, right? Maybe it means something. What does it mean? Maybe it means something.
Commander-in-Chief for the time being on the other part, witnesseth that the said Roger Scott doth hereby covenant and agree to and with the said Royal African Company, the Captain General and Commander-in-Chief for the time being, to serve him or his lawful successors in any of the Royal African Company settlements on the coast of Africa, from the day of the date of these presents to the full term of 7 years, from hence next ensuing, fully to be complete and ended, there to serve in such employment as the said Captain General or his successors shall employ him, according to the custom of the country in like kind. In consideration whereof the said Captain General and Commander-in-Chief doth covenant and agree to and with the said Roger Scott to find and allow him meat, drink, apparel and lodging according to the custom of the country. In witness whereof the parties aforesaid to these presents have interchangeably put their hands and seals the day and year first above written. Signed, sealed and delivered in the presence of us at Cape Corso Castle in Africa, where no stamped paper was to be had. Mungo Herdman, President, witnesses. John Atkins, Register, witnesses. In like manner was drawn out and exchanged the indentures of Thomas Howe of Barnstable in the county of Devon, Samuel Fletcher of East Smithfield, London, John Lane of Lombard Street, London, David Littlejohn of Bristol, John King of Shadwell Parish, London, Henry Dennis of Bideford, Hugh Harris of Corfe Castle, Devonshire, William Taylor of Bristol, Thomas Owen of Bristol, John Mitchell of Shadwell Parish, London, Joshua Lee of Liverpool, William Shoren of Wapping Parish, London, Robert Hartley of Liverpool, John Griffin of Blackwall, Middlesex, James Crombie of
Okay.
James Greenham of Marshfield, Gloucestershire, John Horn of St James's Parish, London.
I think what I have to do now,
Cambridgeshire, David Rice of Bristol. None of which I hear and
I have to mix up a thin glaze of black, one more run of the thin stuff.
Till His Majesty's
And that is to do
the former died abroad,
this
the latter came home
over here,
and received
some up
His
here.
Majesty's pardon. The account of the whole
this stuff,
stands thus:
this left side stuff, some teeth shading, things like that. Just light.
respited 2. To
And then we're into
till the Marshalsea
a
17.
mid black.
Killed in the Ranger,
And that'll
10.
be
Killed in
the optic
Fortune,
nerve,
3.
the teeth,
Died
the
in
nose,
passage to Cape Corso,
the
15.
cheeks, you know,
Died
with some
afterwards
real
in the
tight
castle,
definition there.
4. Negroes
It's almost
and
done.
ships, 70. Total
Pretty happy.
276
It's gonna be
men.
cool.
I am not ignorant how acceptable the behaviour and dying words of malefactors are to the generality of our countrymen, and therefore shall deliver what occurred, worthy of notice, in the behaviour of these criminals. The
All right.
first figs that were called to execution were Magnus, Moody, Simpson, Sutton, Ashplant, and Hardy, all of them old standers and notorious offenders. When they were brought out of the hold on the parade, in order to break off their fetters and fit behalters, none of them, it was observed, appeared the least dejected, unless Sutton, who spoke faint, but it was rather imputed to a flux that had seized him 2 or 3 days before than fear.
That's it,
A
man.
gentleman who
That's
was
how you do
surgeon
it.
of the ship,
All right, so
so charitable at this
mix
time,
up the
to offer
mid
himself
glaze,
an ordinary
the
and
thin glaze.
representative,
Mix up
as well as
one more
his
run of
ignorance,
thin glaze.
the heinousness of their
Mix it,
sin, and
do
the
those.
necessity which lay on them of repentance. One particular part of which ought to be acknowledging the justice they had met with.
And then I think what I want to do also is make some with that. So first do the skull, and then make some corrections if necessary on the
They all exclaimed against the severity
on the
of
long
the
bones.
and were so hardened as to curse and wish the same justice might overtake
that.
all the members of
So-
it as had been dealt to them.
Yeah.
They were poor rogues, they said.
Mid glaze, mix up some corrections,
no less guilty in
and
another way
we're
as
ready to go.
escaped. When he endeavoured to compose their minds, exhorting them to die in
And I think
charity
maybe I'll
before
even
the
use.
and would have diverted them from such vain
No, they're not
discourse
straightened
by
out
asking
like
them
that.
their
They're-
country, age, and the like. Some
Well,
of them
we'll see about
answered,
that.
what was that to him? They suffered the law and should give no account but to God. Walking to the gallows without a tear, in token of sorrow for their past offences, all showing as much concern as a man would express at travelling a bad road. Nay, Simpson, at seeing a woman that he knew, he said, he had
First
lain
do the
with
left
that
side,
bitch
then the
3
top,
times, and now she
upper
was come
right.
to see him hanged.
You know,
And
and then
when
whatever
he saw
touch-ups
the
need to be
behind
made.
him, which
Yeah,
happened from
but
the
you
knocking
come
and
back in
pointed
with
the way of brilliant
so
malefactors to
mix the
execution,
glaze, come in with the
observed
touch-ups,
that he had seen many
and then
more
it's
hanged,
on to
but this way
like
of the
some
hands
deep,
being tied
deeper
behind
black
them,
stuff.
he was a stranger
But this is
to him,
nearly done.
never saw
These
before
look
anything
rad,
like
man. I'm really
it.
happy.
These two little incidents,
Anyway,
not above 26
yeah,
years
that's
old,
it.
but
Mix
made
glaze.
the most pathetic
Finish the
speech
skulls.
of any at the the gallows.
Make corrections to
He
longbows
first
and
declaimed
just
against
dabs,
the
right?
gilded
You don't have
baits
to
of
do
power, liberty, and wealth
anything heavy-handed.
that had
It's all
ensnared him
fairly
among the
close.
pirates, his
Do that.
unexperienced years
And then-
not being able to withstand the
And then it's
temptation.
one more pass
That
with
the
just
briskness he'd shown, which so
adding
fatally
black
had
to the
put
remainder
him
of that thin
favour
glaze.
was not
And
so
that's
much a fault of
hitting the
principle
optic nerves,
as
the top of the
liveliness
nose,
and
the sides of the
vivacity
cheeks, the
nature.
teeth, tops and
He
bottoms,
was now extremely afflicted for the
and
injuries he'd
the
done
ends
to
of the
men,
longbows.
and begged theirs
Right?
and
And then
God's
you're,
forgiveness.
that may be
Very
it.
earnestly
That might be
exhorting
all the
spectators
painting
to
that's
remember
required
their
on this, because
Creator
it's,
in their youth,
right now the tone is right,
God
the color's
times,
right.
that their
I'm
minds
really
took not a
pleased with
wrong
these.
bias.
They look cool as fuck.
Concluding with this apt similitude,
So,
that he stood there as a beacon
you know, I
upon
mean,
a
that
rock,
symbol, like, you don't even need any shading on this. These could be just silhouettes, but they chose to paint them
End of chapter 9,
and
part 12.
model them out, and of course that's why I'm doing it this way. But you know, that symbol, it's
Chapter 10 of
skull
the General
and
History
X
of the
bones.
Pirates,
Man,
Volume 1.
it's cool.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.
They are cool. And
Recorded
then
by
let it dry.
Richard Kilmer.
Just let it
The
dry and
General
we'll hang
History
them in
of
the
the
wind
Pirates,
tomorrow. I'll put them on
Volume
the laundry
By
lines.
Charles Johnson.
Let them dry in the
Chapter
wind and the
10.
sun tomorrow.
Captain Anstis and
I'm
his
going to
crew.
run it through the wash to
Thomas
just put a
Anstis shipped
just a
himself at Providence in the year
thin
1718.
wash with
aboard the
brown and black
Buckassoon.
on it.
And
Just
it was
to tone
one
it down
of
a bit.
6 that conspired together to go off a
Iron
pirate
and we're
in
done.
the vessel.
Like complete. Oh, and
The
then let's
rest
shoot
were
with a musket too.
Howell
I'll do
Davis,
that.
Robert's predecessor, killed at the island of Princess,
But
Dennis
it's cool,
Hopkins,
man. They
killed
look awesome.
at the
Very
taking
happy
of the rich Portuguese ship
with my
on
pirate
the coast of
flags.
Brazil. Walter Kennedy hanged at
Right.
execution dock, and 2 others, which I forbear to name,
Mm-hmm.
because I understand they are at this day employed in an honest vocation in the city.
Well, good for them.
What followed concerning Antist's piracies has been included in the 2 preceding
Good
chapters.
for them.
I shall
They're
only
employed in
observe
an honest
that the
profession.
combination of these 6 men, above mentioned, was the beginning of that company that afterwards proved so formidable under Captain Roberts, for whom Anstis separated the 18th of April, 1721, in the Good Fortune brigantine.
All right, man.
To pursue his adventures upon the coast of Guinea, whilst he
Where's
returned
this?
to the West
Thank you.
Indies
All right, let's mix up a
upon
glaze.
the like design. About the middle of June, these pirates met with one Captain Marston between Hispaniola and Jamaica,
I don't know.
bound on a voyage to New York.
Well, it's a good
From
start.
whom they took all the wearing
That's an even
apparel
better
they could
start.
find, also his liquors and
Yeah,
provisions,
sure, why not?
and 5 of his men, but did not touch his cargo. 2 or 3 other vessels were also plundered by them in this cruise,
Okay.
out of whom they
Here
stocked
we
themselves
go.
with provisions and men. Among the rest, I think,
Hmm.
was Darwin, Captain Ross, from Cork in Ireland.
I don't
But
know, dude.
this I won't be
I think
positive
that's it.
of, because they denied it themselves. This ship had 600 barrels of beef aboard, besides other provisions, and was taken off Martinico, where Colonel Doyle of Montserrat and his family were passengers. The colonel was very much abused and wounded for endeavoring to save a poor woman that was also a passenger from the insults of that brutish crew, and the pirates prevailing, 21 of them forced the poor creature successively, afterwards broke her back and flung her into the sea. I say, I will not be positive that it was Anstis' crew that acted this unheard of violence and cruelty, though the circumstances of the place, the time, the force of the vessel, and the number of men do all concur, and I can place the villainy nowhere else. But that such a fact was done, there is too much evidence for it to be doubted of.
Okay,
They
you
thought fit
fine
to put
and
an end
dandy.
to this cruise.
You fine and
They
dandy
went to
skulls?
one of the islands to clean, which they effected without any disturbances, and came out again,
Right.
and stretching away toward Bermudas, met with a stout ship called the Morning Star, bound from Guinea to Carolina. They made a prize of her, and kept her for their own use. In a day or two, a ship from Barbados, bound to New York, fell into their hands, and taking out her guns and tackle, mounted the Morning Star with 32 pieces of cannon, John Fenn, captain. For the brigantine, being of less force, the Morning Star would have fallen to Anstis as elder officer. Yet he was so in love with his own vessel, she being an excellent sailor, that he made it his choice to stay in her and let Fenn, who was before his gunner, command the great ship. Now they had 2 good ships well manned. It may be supposed they were in a condition to undertake something bold. But their government was disturbed by malcontents, and a kingdom divided within itself cannot stand. They had such a number of new men amongst them that seemed not so violently inclined for the game, that whatever the captain proposed, it was certainly carried against him, so that they came to no fixed resolution.
Okay,
Undertaking any enterprise.
now we're rocking.
Therefore, there was nothing
Let's
to be
go.
done
All right,
but break up
sounds
the
on.
company, which
Let's
seemed
mix this thing blaze. I'm going to
majority.
cover the camera for just a moment so you don't get seasick as I adjust it, and
To which purpose various
we're going to mix up a new glaze. Okay,
At length, it was
there we
concluded
go.
to send home a
Mouse pad out of
petition
the way.
to His Majesty. There being no act of
Here
indemnity
we go.
in force for a
What we
party
need
that
is
weight the issue.
some
At the same time, one
of
gentleman,
this
bosun of the
liquid.
good fortune, proposed
There's
a
the
place
liquid.
of safe retreat, it being an uninhabited island near Cuba,
and
which he had been used to in the late
spirit.
war when he went to privateering against the Spaniards. This being approved of, it was unanimously resolved on,
And some black paint.
the underwritten petition drawn up and signed by the whole company in the manner of what they call a round robin.
Right?
That is, the names
That's
were
really all it
written in a
takes.
circle
There,
to
and
avoid all apparent
I need
grievance.
my brush.
At least any person
There
should
we
be
go.
marked out by the government
And I
as
think
a
this might
sensible
actually be a
road
little too
among
light,
them.
but just based on
To
the
His
amount.
Most Sacred Majesty
It was there
George,
before, but
by the grace of
we're
God,
gonna mix it all
Great
and we'll see.
Britain, France, and Ireland, King,
Right,
defender
but this
of
is
the
pretty
faith,
good. It's just
etc.
real thin.
The humble petition
But that's what I
of the
want.
company
Like,
now
this should be
belonging to
just
the
very
ship Morning
delicate.
Star,
This
and
last,
brigantine
this is
Good
the last
Fortune,
run of
lying under the
the thin
ignominious
black
name
glaze.
and
So we're
denomination
going to
of pirates.
just paint. Just going to
Humbly
mix this
showing
up.
that we, your majesty's most loyal subjects, have at sundry times been taken by Bartholomew Roberts, the then captain of the above said vessels and company, together with another ship in which we left him.
So let's
and have been
consolidate
forced by
this
him
into a
and his
pile.
accomplices to enter
Now I
into
think this is pretty good.
serve
It's kind of
the said
thin,
company as
but
pirates,
this should do the
much
job.
contrary to our
Yeah.
wills and inclinations.
What we want is even distribution of the pigment, even consistency.
That impious way of
I want it
living
well mixed.
did,
You know, you
with
can't.
unanimous
can't
consent
have-
and contrary to the knowledge
Well,
of the said
you
Roberts,
can't.
were his
I don't want
accomplices,
inconsistency.
on or about the
I want it to
18th day of
be
April,
predictable. There we
1721,
go.
Let's
get this out of the way. I'm gonna pull this and
just
just wipe my brush so it's clean and I don't get garbage all over my hands.
No other intent.
And here we go. All right. So let's bring the flags up. It's very exciting.
Subjects may, with more safety, return to our native
Hey,
country
thank you,
and
whoever
serve
you
the nation
were, for
to which
liking
we
the video.
belong in our respective capacities, without fear of being prosecuted by the injured, whose estates have suffered by the said Roberts and his accomplices.
So here we go.
Forcible detainment by the
Okay,
said
let's just pull one. It doesn't even
most
matter where we
humbly
start.
implore your
Let's go with
majesty's
this one.
most royal assent to this our humble petition.
That's that. So we're gonna go on the left side. I need to bring up, so you can see the camera, and I don't need to see the camera. What I need to see is the reference in there, so I'm gonna bring that up.
The petitioners in their return, about 20 leagues to the windward of that island.
All right.
And let them know
So
what
let's go.
success
And I just want to
the
scrub.
When this was done, the pirates
We're just gonna go
retired to the
lightly.
island before proposed with the ship at
You know what?
Brigantine.
This goes along.
The island, which I have no name for, lies off the southwest end.
This goes almost right up to the edge of
uninhabited
this.
and little frequented.
There we go.
On
Like right
the
here.
east end is a lagoon,
And then
so narrow that a ship can but just go in, though there's
Just
some
like
15
this.
to 22 foot water for almost a league up.
right, just
On
a
both
little bit on
sides
the
of
edge
the
there.
lagoon grows red mangrove
And then
trees,
here,
very thick, that the entrance of it, as well as the
kind of even
vessels
with that part
lying
of the
there,
eye.
is
Right
hardly
here.
to be
So
seen.
that's about
middle
it.
of the
Just
island.
like
Are here and there a small, thick wood of tall pines and other trees scattered about in different places.
quite at the top
not
of the eye.
having
So
provisions
just going
for
across
both,
here.
they were
Hey, I
forced
picked
to
up
take
another
with the
couple of
alcohol,
subscribers tonight.
which
Thank
was
you,
fish
everybody
of
who
several
has
sorts,
subscribed. I'm glad.
particularly turtle,
I'm very grateful.
which latter
I'll
was the
endeavor to
cheapest
make
food they lived
content
on,
that you'll want to come
and was
back for.
found in great plenty
That's great.
on the coasts of the island.
Um,
Whether there might be any
go
wild hogs, beef, or other
here,
cattle,
right?
common
We're
to
just putting
several
in some
islands
shading
of the
on this
West
side.
Indies, or that the
It's a little bit
pirates were
wider.
too idle to hunt them, or
This
whether
comes
they
right
preferred
across
other
just here. I
provisions
don't want
to
it
that sort
too
of diet.
dense, but
I
it
know
has to
not.
be
But I
kind
was
of evenly
informed by them
distributed. There we
that for
go.
the whole time
There.
they eat not a bit of any kind of flesh meat nor bread. The latter was
Now let's
supplied by
move
rice,
up just a
of which
bit.
they had a great quantity
pull out.
aboard. This was boiled and squeezed dry, and so eat with the turtle.
You know what? I think that this is
There
a
are 3 or 4
bit
sorts
denser
of
than I
these
want,
creatures in the
so I'm
West
going to thin
Indies,
this
the largest of which
with
will weigh
just a
150
bit
or
of
200 pounds weight.
scuzzy turpentine. And by scuzzy turpentine, I mean exactly that. This is turpentine with a whole bunch of old paint, but it's all the colors. This is really good stuff. In fact, I'm not even going to just stop at that. I'm going to add some spirits to it and just keep it thin and clear. I don't think the camera can quite pick this up, but I'm more concerned with getting the right color and consistency of the glaze. Sorry, but
The manner of catching this fish is very
there's nobody here
particular.
anyway, I think.
You must understand that in the months of May, June, and July, they lay their eggs
Yeah,
in
I'm going to
order
put
to hatch their
a
young,
little bit more.
and this 3 times in a
else
season, which is always in the sand.
I just want it kind of
seashore,
thin and light.
each
And
laying 80 or 90 eggs at a time. The male
There you
accompanies the female and come ashore in the night only, when they must be watched without making any noise or having a light. As soon as they land, the men that watch for them turn them on their backs and haul them above high water mark, and leave them till next morning, where they are sure to find them, for they can't turn again nor move from the place.
okay,
It is to be observed that beside their laying time, they come ashore to feed. But then, what's very remarkable in these creatures, they always resort to a different place to breed, leaving their usual haunts for 2 or 3 months, and 'tis thought they eat nothing in all that season. They pass their time here in dancing and other diversions, agreeable to these sorts of folks.
all right.
Among the rest,
There we go.
they appointed a mock court of judicature to try one another for purpose.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Day was paid
There's
to
that.
another.
We're going to do the same thing on this one.
Account given me of one of these merry
Carrying
trials,
it on
and as it appeared
both
diverting,
sides. On the
I shall
left,
give
right.
readers
How do we do this? This is
the court of criminals being both appointed
along the cheek,
and
and
also
the
the
temple
person plead,
connects
the
to
judge
the
hung up in a
chin,
tree and had a dirty
or not the
tarpaulin
chin, but
over his
the
shoulders.
uh,
This was done
what do you
by
call it?
way of
Zygomatic.
with a
It's
throat
along
hat
it.
on
Oh,
his head
whatever.
and a
We're
large
gonna
pair
go
of
along here,
spectacles
right?
on
This
his
goes.
nose.
Yeah, that's better. Way
Thus
better,
equipped,
dude.
He settled himself
Much better.
in his place,
So we're gonna go
and abundance of officers
up the
attending
side.
below,
When
with crows, handspikes, etc.
there.
instead
Oh, look at
of
that.
claws,
That's
tipstaves,
dead
and
on right
such
there.
like.
All
The
right, so
criminals were brought
just
out,
scrub it in.
making
That's all you gotta do. Just real thin.
who acted as
You know,
Attorney
it's
General,
really,
opened the
really
charge against them. Their speeches were very laconic, and their whole proceeding concise.
right?
We shall
Yeah.
give it by way of dialogue. Attorney General. As
And
it
then this
please
comes
your
down
lordship and your gentlemen of the
to
jury,
the.
here is a fellow before you that is a sad dog, a sad, sad dog, and I humbly hope your lordships will order him to be hanged out of the way of
I love this trial. This mock
His
trial
piracy
is
on
so
high
good.
seas, and we shall prove, and it please your lordship, that this fellow, this sad dog before you, has escaped 1,000 storms. Nay, he has got safe ashore when the ship has been cast away, which was a certain sign that he was not born to be drowned. Yet, not having the fear of hanging before his eyes, he went on robbing and ravishing man,
There you go.
woman, and child, plundering the ship's cargoes fore and aft, burning and sinking ship, bark, and boat, as if the devil
Just
had
start
been in him.
putting in the
But this is
box.
not all, my
Right?
lord. He has committed worse felonies than all these.
Columns.
We
There you
shall
go.
prove
That's
that
it.
he is
Just
the
every one of them
guilty
gets that.
fear.
Do that, and
Your
you're all
lordships
set,
know
man. These are
that there
good.
never was a sober fellow.
So carry on.
Was a rogue. My lord, I should have spoke much finer than I do.
Oh, it's a shame nobody's here to watch. This is spectacularly exciting.
Is all out, and how should a man speak good law that is not drank a dram? However, I hope your lordship will order the fellow to be hanged. Judge, hearken me, Sirrah, you lousy, pitiful, ill-looked.
Hearken, hearken.
What have you to say? Why should you not be tucked up immediately and set a sun drying like a scarecrow? Are you guilty?
I would love to hear this performed.
Prisoner.
This is so good.
Not guilty, and it please your worship. Judge. Not guilty? Say so again, Sirrah, and I'll have you hanged without any trial.
There you go.
Prisoner. Please your worship's honor, my lord. I am as honest a poor fellow as ever went between stem and stern of a ship, and can hand, reef, steer, and clap two ends of a rope together, as well as he that ever crossed salt water. But I was taken by one George Bradley, the name of him who sat as judge, a notorious pirate, a sad rogue, as
That's so
ever was
good.
unhanged, and he forced
I
me,
love their sense of
and
humor.
it please your honor. Judge, answer me, Sirrah, how will you be tried? Prisoner, by G in my country.
My God in my
Judge,
country.
the devil you will. Why then, gentlemen of the jury,
Okay.
I think we have nothing to do.
I still need to do
Proceed
tops. Right? We have to take on the tops.
Right, my lord.
This will get
The fellow
the
should be
bases.
suffered to speak.
And then we're going in with sharpening of the blacks. And hopefully that will tighten this up sufficient that it shall
I hope you lordships will
suffice
consider.
to define what we need here. So we're going
How dare you
a
talk
little
of
bit up
considering?
here.
Sirrah,
Why can't you see this? Is this not playing or something? Oh, it's
I'll
just a
make a
delay.
treason to consider.
Going across.
But I hope your lordship will hear some reason. Judge, do you hear now
A
how
little
the
bit in there.
scoundrel prince?
Just super
What have we to
thin.
do with reason?
Super
I'll
thin.
have you know, rascal, we don't sit here to hear reason. We go according to law. Is our dinner ready? Attorney General. Yes, my lord. Judge.
There you go. Right.
Here,
Just
you rascal, at the bar. Hear me, Sarah.
piling
Hear
it on.
You must suffer. For three reasons. First, because it is not fit I should sit here as judge and nobody be hanged. Secondly, you must be hanged because you have a damned hanging look. And thirdly, you must be hanged because I am hungry. For you know, Sarah, that 'tis a custom that whenever the judge's dinner is ready before the trial is over, the prisoner is to be hanged, of course. There's law for you, ye dog. So take him away, jailer.
Oh.
This is the trial just as it was related to me. The design of my setting it down is only to show how these fellows can jest upon things, the fear and dread of which should make them tremble. The beginning of August 1722, the pirates made ready the brigantine and came out to sea
Okay.
and beating up to windward,
And that's it.
laid the track for their correspondent in her voyage to Jamaica and spoke with her.
I think it's time.
Finding nothing was done in England,
You have to do across the top in the upper right.
they returned to
Right.
their consorts at the
I'm
island.
guessing that that's what that is. Let's look at the retouched version and see what they thought.
To continue the abominable course of life.
I don't know. Did they?
In order thereto, they sailed
There's some.
the ship and
There's some
brigantine
color there, but
to
I
the
don't know that
southward.
they
And
really
the
put
next
much
night,
on it.
by intolerable neglect, they run the Morning Star upon the Grand Caymans and wrecked her. The brigantine seeing the fate of her
I don't know. We're gonna see.
off in time,
We're gonna put.
so weather being
There's maybe a little too much color upon it, but we'll see. I think I need a little bit of color in the upper right.
We're safe ashore.
Let's do a little bit of color
She
here.
came to an anchor. In order to fetch them,
Center to the
having
right.
brought Fenn, the captain, Phillips, the
How about
carpenter,
this? Just
and
like
a few
this.
others aboard, 2 men of war came down.
All right,
upon
just
them,
do that. That's
seized
enough.
the Hector
Right there.
and Adventure, so that the brigantine had but just time to cut their cable and get to sea.
Just a little bit, just some smudges. You don't need much.
Within gunshot
Just a
for
little
several
bit.
hours. Estes and his crew were now under the greatest consternation
So
imaginable.
here
Finding
and
the gale
across.
freshen, and the man of war gaining ground upon them, so that in all probability they must have been prisoners in 2 hours more. But it pleased God to give them a little longer time. The wind dying away, the pirates got out
There you
their
go.
oars
Just some
and
smudges
rowed
right
their
now. That's all that's
and
happening
thereby
here
got
is
clear of
a
their
little bit
enemy.
of shadow and some smudges.
But Hector landed her
We're
men
gonna
on the
go
island and took
across.
40 of the Morning Star's crew without any resistance made by them. But on the contrary, alleged that they were forced men and that they were glad of this opportunity to escape from the pirates.
There you
The
go.
rest hid themselves in the woods and could
Go
not
around.
be found. George Bradley, the master, and 3 more surrendered afterwards to a Bermudas sloop and were carried to that island. The brigantine, after her escape, sailed to a small island near the Bay of Honduras to clean and refit. And on her way
That's it, man.
thither,
But these
the
are
Rhode Island
really,
sloop,
really,
Captain
really just
Murphy, commander,
almost
and
done.
2 or 3 other vessels.
And I
which
really
they
now want to just go in on
hands aboard thereof.
some.
While she was cleaning, a scheme was concerted between Captain Durfee, some other prisoners, and 2 or 3
Durfee or
other
Dursey?
members for to seize some of the chiefs and carry off the brigantine. But the same being discovered before she was fit for sailing, their design was prevented. However, Captain Durfee and 4 or 5 more got ashore with some arms and ammunition, and when the pirate's canoe came in for water, he seized the boat with the men, upon which Anstis ordered another boat to be manned with 30 hands and sent ashore, which was accordingly done. But Captain Durfee and the company he had by that time got together gave them such a warm reception that they were contented to betake themselves to their vessel again. About the beginning of December 1722, Anstis left this
That's
place
it.
and
We're
returned
done.
to the islands.
Now,
Designing to accumulate all the power and strength he could, since there was no looking back. He took in the cruise a good ship, commanded by Captain Smith, which he mounted with 24 guns, and Fenn, a one-handed man, who commanded the Morning Star when she was lost, went aboard to command her. They cruised together and took a vessel or 2, and then went to the Bahama Islands, where they met with what they wanted, viz. A sloop loaded with provisions from Dublin.
I think what I want now is to do
It was now
just the
time
long
to
bones,
fit up
just
and clean their frigate,
fix
taken,
them up so
and
that
put her
they're
in a
consistent.
condition
Like
to do business.
this should be a square, for example. Like right here, just upper right or upper left should
Where they
be.
arrived the beginning of April 1723 with the Antelope sloop and her cargo. They fell to work immediately, got the guns,
You know what? I don't think it
stores,
needs that.
everything else
No.
out on the island.
What I
and
need
put
to
the
do is
ship
hang
on
this.
the heel. And just then, as ill luck would
Hang
have
it?
it, came in the Winchelsea man of war by way of visit, which put the marooners in such a surprise that they set fire to the ship and sloop and fled ashore to the woods. Anstis, in the brigantine,
Hang this,
escaped
and
by
then
having a light pair of heels,
Go for.
but it put his company into such a disorder that their government could never be set to rights again. For some of the newcomers,
Yeah.
and
Hang
those
all
who
of
had been
these,
tired
and
with
then
the
let's
trade,
see what we
put an
have.
end to the raid
Hang them all.
by shooting Thomas Anstis
This should be
in his
all
head,
of the dark
and
room.
afterwards the quartermaster and 2 or 3 others. The rest submitted. They put into irons and surrendered them up, and the vessel at Caranco, a Dutch settlement, where they were tried and hanged, and those concerned in delivering up the vessel acquitted. But to return to Captain Fenn, he was taken straggling with his gunner and 3 more a day or 2 after their misfortune by the man of war's men, and carried to Antigua, where they were all executed, and Fenn hanged in chains. Those who remained stayed some time in the island, keeping up and down in the woods, with a hand to look out. At length, Providence so ordered it that a small sloop came
Okay,
into the harbor,
just that.
which they all
Now,
got board of, except 2
I
or 3
think that's
negroes,
it.
and those they left
I
behind.
think you now get.
They did not think fit to pursue any further adventures, and therefore unanimously resolved to
I don't think I
separate,
change anything
which they accordingly did.
from what's there.
And in October last,
I think I now
came
go
to the
in
Bristol
on
Channel, sunk
dark,
the sloop,
dark,
and getting
dark.
ashore in the boat,
So mix.
dispersed themselves.
Maybe cut this in half and add some black, or you know what? Just
Chapter
add black to this.
Recording by Richard
Just
Gilbert,
add black to this and go in and deepen
Texas.
the cheekbones on the interior side, the top of the nose, the inside of the eyes, and the
Chapter 11. of the General
You know,
History of the Pirates,
just
Volume 1.
sharpen up
This
the
is a
details.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox
And that's it.
recordings are in the book.
Sharpen up the details, and that's that.
Please visit
Sufficiently
LibriVox.org.
coarse.
Recording by Kate Mackenzie. The General History of the
I
Pirates.
don't want to mess with it at all. I like it.
Chapter 11 of Captain Whirly and his crew.
I don't want to mess with it at all. I just want to define the blacks.
Particular, setting out in a small open boat with 8
Yeah,
others
dude, just define the blacks and leave it alone. It's fine.
They took with them a few biscuits,
And I'm going to add some black to it. And we're going to go in now and tighten up. I'm going to hit the optic nerve, the top of the nose, the inside of the cheek. I'm just going to define some of the shapes of the skull. So what I want to do is pull, just literally physically pull some of this glaze over, like half of it. I'm going to leave the thin stuff on the other side of the palette. Well, I guess I can turn this so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just pulling some of this over here, and I'm going to add black to this. And I don't need a lot of black, just a little bit. You know. We're going to put this here. Aha! A black ensign with a white death's head. That's what we got.
They all signed articles and bound themselves under a solemn oath to take no quarters, but to stand by one another till the
So we're
last
going to
man,
mix this with black.
which was rashly fulfilled a little afterwards. For,
This
going
should be
into
a
England
nice,
and North Carolina
nice
to
black
flee, the governor received
glaze.
information of it and sitted out 2 sloops, one of 8 guns.
Fitted out. She's using the long S as
70 men between them.
an F, which is
Whirly had cleaned
incorrect.
his sloop and sailed before the Carolina sloops reached the place and steered to the northward. But the sloops just mentioned, pursuing the same course, came in sight of Whirly as he was cruising off the capes of Virginia, and being in the offing, he stood in as soon as he saw the sloops, intending thereby to have cut them off from James River, for he verily believed they had been bound thither, not imagining in the least they were in pursuit of him. The 2 sloops
He's in
standing
trouble.
above the capes at
Okay.
the same time, and
Now,
Whirly
where
was
is my
attacked
thin
by
brush?
the
Somewhere
inhabitants of
around
James
here I have a
River
really good tight brush, and I need it. This
This
is the tool for this job. Okay.
So that all the ships and vessels that were in the road or in the rivers of the bay had orders immediately to hail into the shore for their security,
Okay.
or else to prepare
So here we
their
go.
defense if they
Now,
found themselves in a condition to
move this
fight.
out of the way.
Soon after, the 2 boats
Alright, so we're going to turn the camera on. We're going to pick up a flag.
One of the pirates was in the bay, being a small sloop of 6 guns. The governor, expecting the rest
See what happens.
altogether makes an attempt to
See
land,
what the hell's going on around here.
to arms and collected all the force that could be got together
Okay.
to oppose them.
So what I need now is I want my template,
Of the ships,
I want my small template.
in short, put the whole colony in a
I'm gonna
warlike
put-
posture. But was very much
Is it this one?
surprised
No,
at
it's
last
reversed. So
to
let's
see
put
all
it this
the
way.
sons of pirates
Right now I'm
fighting
just going to
one
do
another.
the top of the
The
nose.
truth of the matter is,
and the optic
Whirly
nerve.
gained the bay, thinking to make sure of his 2
Kind of
prizes
match
and
up
keeping them from coming in. But
the toofs.
by the hoisting of the king's colours and
Right,
firing
that's
the gun,
all we're gonna
he
do
quickly
is
was
just
sensible of his
sort of
mistake,
match this
and
stuff
too
up.
soon perceived that the tables were turned upon him. That instead of keeping them out, he found himself.
Is this black
facing
enough?
false.
Is really what I'm trying to answer here. Is
When
this
the
black
pirates
enough?
saw how things went,
And I don't think
they
it is,
resolutely
actually.
prepared
I think this
themselves
is a
for
little
desperate
too thin.
defense, and though
We're gonna
3 to
find
1
out in a
odds,
minute.
Whirly and his crew determined to fight to the last gasp
No.
and receive no
I don't think it is black enough. What I want is, I want it blacker.
They must either die or conquer upon the spot.
like, this is close, but it's not quite black enough. So we're doing that eye. I'll do them both, but
One sloop getting upon
I'm
his
pretty
fore,
sure that this
the
is
other
not
on his
black
bow.
enough. So
Whirly
pull
and
that.
crew drew up
It's
above
black,
the
but it's not quite there. I want to add a little bit more black paint.
so that in
I
a
want this to be dramatic. I want it to be like, oh my God, look at that! Pow! You know, I want this to be striking. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a bit of black to that. We're gonna add a bit of black. Like, this is close. It's there. There's some depth to it, but what I want is some crispness. I want it just slightly darker than that, more, and not even darker, but more opaque. So we're gonna go a little bit darker because I want to be able to add a layer to this and provide definition, and that's gonna change the range of contrast of the entire skull and crossbones and flag.
For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rain.
Yeah, okay, I don't like that
General
name.
History of the Pirates.
I do know a Rainey. She was a great bartender at Kelly's Pub.
Chapter 12, Part 1. Of Captain George Lowther and his crew.
Oh, he was a bad one.
George Lowther sailed out of the River of Thames in one of the Royal African
Okay, that's
Colony
better.
ships
Like
called
that.
the Gambia Castle.
Right? It should be a slightly deeper.
Charles Russell
So a
commanded,
little bit more black.
of which ship the said Lowther was second mate. Aboard of the same ship
Maybe a
was
little too
certain
much, but I have
number of
plenty of
soldiers
glaze so I can,
by one
if
John
this is too
Matthews,
intense, I can then thin
carried
it back
to one of the company's
with
settlements
the
on
glaze. So
River of Gambia.
let's mix all this in, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll turn this so you can see it. So I put a little bit of black in here, and I think I got just that's just the tiniest amount of black, but really a little goes a long way when you're mixing the glaze. It's a delicate operation. There's some precision required. So anyway, I'm mixing the glaze, and this is the same glaze that I did on the rest of this. It's just, we're just varying the density and opacity of it.
Fort and garrison not only came to be lost again to the company, but a fine
Right,
galley,
so,
well provided and worth 10,000 pounds, turned against her masters. The names of governor and captain sounded great, but when the gentlemen found that the power that generally goes along with those titles was overswayed and borne down by the merchants and factors, mechanic fellows as they thought them, they grew very impatient and dissatisfied, especially Massey, who was very loud in his complaints against them, particularly at the small allowance of provisions to him and his men. For the garrison and governor, too, were victualled by the merchants, which was no
Should have
small
fed them
thing
better.
for
You wouldn't have had the trouble.
And as the want of eating was the
Don't
only
skimp
thing
on
that made
food,
the great
dude.
Sancho quit his government, so did it here rend and tear theirs to pieces.
Okay.
For Massey told them that he did not come there to be a guinea slave, and that he had promised his men good treatment and provisions fitting for soldiers. That as he had the care of so many of his Majesty's subjects, if they would not provide for them in a handsome manner, he should take suitable measures for the preservation of so many of his countrymen and companions.
Okay.
The governor at this
So here we
time
go.
was very ill of a fever.
I
and
think we
with
may
better
have
complications
the
of
proper
sickness,
density
was
here.
carried
Let's
aboard
try
the
it.
ship Gambia Castle, where he continued
Let's
for
find
about
out.
3 weeks.
And we're going to find that out very easily just by putting some on here. So let's put this template back on. Right? Let's put the template on here.
The merchants had certainly orders from the company to issue the provisions out to the garrison, and the same is done along the whole coast. But whether they had cut them short of the allowance that was appointed them, I can't say. But if they did, then is the loss of the ship and garrison owing principally to their ill conduct. However,
Alright, let's
the
try
accident
this.
that happened on board the ship did not a little contribute to this misfortune, which was a pique that the captain of her took against his second mate, George Lowther, the man who is the subject of this short
I always
history,
wanted to go
and
darker,
who,
but I
losing his
really don't
favor,
want to go.
found
I don't
means
want to
of
go too
ingratiating
far
himself
on
in
this.
the
So
good
let's
liking
go.
of the common sailors, insomuch that when
There's a
Captain
stripe.
Russell ordered him to be punished, the men took up handspikes and
We're just
threatened to
gonna go
knock
as
that
an
man
X
down
here.
that offered to lay hold of the
Right.
mate. This served but to widen the differences between him and the captain, and more firmly attached Lowther to the ship's company, the greatest part of which he found ripe for any mischief in
Yeah,
the world.
this is it. I don't want to go deeper than
Captain
this.
Massey was no whit the better reconciled to the place by a longer continuance, nor to the usage he met with there. And having often opportunities
We're
of
going
conversing with Lowther,
from the top
with whom they
down.
contracted an intimacy in the voyage,
And then here.
they aggravated one another's grievances to such
It's
a height
just-
that they resolved upon
And then,
measures to curb
right,
the
like
power
that gets
controlling
me-
them, and to provide for themselves after another manner.
Okay,
When the governor
so you get your
recovered his fever,
the top of
he
the
went
nose.
ashore to
So
Paris,
I don't even need the
but took
template
no
for the
notice
top of the
of
nose.
Massey's behavior,
So get that,
though it was
get
such
that.
as might give suspicion of what he designed.
and now
Lowther and the common sailors,
just
who were in
take-
the secret of affairs, grew insolent and bold, even refusing to obey when commanded to their duty by Captain Russell and the chief mate. The captain, seeing how things were carried, goes ashore early one
How about
morning
that?
to the governor and factory in order to hold
Just
a
do that.
council, which Lowther apprehending was in order to prevent his design, so sent a letter in the same boat to Massey, intimating it to him,
why not
and
that?
that he should repair on board,
Right.
for it was high time to put their project in execution.
There you go. I think that gets it.
Massey received
Let's
the
hang
letter.
this.
He
Let
went
me
to
wipe
the
my
soldiers
hands so I
of
don't
the
get
barracks
paint
and said to
everywhere.
them
But
in
I think
others,
that does
"You
it.
that have a mind to
I've got the
go
optic
with us,
nerve.
now is your
I have the
time."
top of the nose,
And they generally
and I have the
consented.
inside of the cheeks
Massey went to the
shading
storeroom,
outward toward the
burst open
sides.
the door,
That's sufficient right now. Let's hang this and see what it looks like.
Then he went to the governor's apartment and took his bed, baggage, plate, and furniture, in expectation that the governor himself, as he had promised Massey, would have gone on board, which he afterwards refused, by reason, as he said, he believed they were going a-pirating, which at first, whatever Lowther
What do you think?
Massey certainly proposed
Oh, it's
going to
rad.
England.
That looks great.
When
That's
this
it
was
right
done,
there.
He sent the boat off to the chief mate with this message.
I'm just doing it like
Get
that.
the guns ready.
And you know, maybe I'll do
A Negro kingdom,
one last
or a
thing is,
settlement,
I'll look at
would
the,
come aboard to dinner. But Lowther, understanding best the
I don't
meaning
think I
of
need
those
to do
orders,
much more than that. I think that's
confronted the
it.
chief mate, shotted the guns, and put the ship in a condition
Man, I
for
think
sailing.
that's it. I almost
In
don't
the
want to do anything
afternoon,
else to
Massey
it.
came on board with the governor's son,
I really
having
think
sent off all the provisions
that
of the
that's
island, and
That's
11
sufficient.
pints of
Maybe
wine, leaving
something
only
to
2
the eye
flat
sockets.
pipes behind in the storehouse, and dismounted all the guns of the fort. In the afternoon, they weighed one anchor, but fearing to be too late to get out of the river, they slipped the other and so fell down, in doing of which they run the ship aground. Massey shewed himself a soldier upon this accident, for as soon as the misfortune
Just do
happened,
them all
he
like
left the
this.
ship with about 16
I
men,
may go back
rose
in on
directly to
eye
the
sockets
fort,
and teeth, but
remounted
right
the
now,
guns, and keeps the
this
garrison
may
there
be
all
sufficient
night
to finish
while
it.
the ship was ashore,
I'm not sure.
and obliged some of the factory to assist in getting her clear. In the meanwhile, Russell came off, but not being suffered to come on board,
Yeah,
he
I
called
think this
Lowther
might be
and offered
sufficient to
him
finish it.
company whatever
So
terms
let's,
they were pleased to accept of,
Just do that.
upon
Do
condition
the
of
optic nerves,
surrendering up
the
ship,
noses, the
which had
cheeks.
no effect
Just
upon any
that
of them.
center section.
In the morning they got
Leave
her
it alone.
afloat, and Massey and his men came aboard, after having nailed up and dismounted all the cannon of the fort. They put the governor's son and 2 or 3 others ashore who were not
Look how
willing to
cute
go
this
without
little
the
cat
governor,
is.
and sailed out of the
Isn't she
river,
adorable?
having exchanged several shot with the Martha, Honor, etc. that lay there, without doing execution on either side. When the ship came out to sea, Lowther called up all the company, and told them it was the greatest folly imaginable to think of returning to England, for what they had already done could not be justified upon any pretense whatsoever, but would be looked upon in the eye of the law a capital offense, and that none of them were in a condition to withstand the attacks of such
I think that's
powerful
it.
adversaries as they would be
We're in
within
good shape now.
home.
All right.
For his part, he was determined not to run such a hazard, and therefore, if his proposal was not agreed to, he desired to be set ashore in some place of safety, that they had a good ship under them, parcel of great fellows,
Okay, man.
that it was not their business to
That's
starve
where
or
we're
make
going.
slaves, and therefore, if they were all of his mind, they should seek their fortunes upon the seas, as other adventurers had done before them. They one and all came into the measures, knocked down the cabins,
Yeah.
made the ship
Just
flush
tighten it
fore
up.
and aft.
That's it for now. Just the optic nerve, the nose, and the cheeks. That's all I'm doing on every section, and then I'm going to go back in, probably heighten or deepen the eye sockets and the teeth. But for now, it's just optic nerve, nose, and cheeks.
1. The captain is to have 2 full shares. The master is to have 1 share and a half. The doctor, mate, gunner, and boatswain 1 share and a quarter. 2. He that shall be found
pretty good, dude.
guilty of taking up any unlawful weapon on board the privateer, or any prize by us taken, so as to strike or abuse one another in any regard, shall suffer what punishment the captain and majority of the company shall think fit. 3. He that shall be found guilty of cowardice in the time of engagement shall suffer what punishment the captain and majority shall think fit. 4. If any gold, jewels, silver, etc. be found on board of any prize or prizes to the value of a piece of 8, and the finder do not deliver it to the quartermaster in the space of 24 hours, he shall suffer what punishment the captain and majority shall think fit. 5. He that is found guilty of gaming or defrauding another to the value of a shilling
Oh my
shall suffer
goodness,
what
this is
punishment
cool,
the captain
cool,
and
cool.
majority of the company shall think fit.
I like it.
6.
Yeah.
He that shall have the misfortune to lose a limb at the time of engagement shall have the sum of 250 pounds sterling, and remain with the company as long as he shall think fit. 7. Good quarters to be given when called for. 8. He that sees a sail first shall have the best pistol or small arm on board her. It was the 13th of June that Lowther left the settlement, and on the 20th, being then within 20 leagues of Barbados, he came upon a brigantine belonging to Boston, called the Charles, James Douglas master, which they plundered in a piratical manner, and let the vessel go. But lest she should meet with any of the station ships, and so give information of the robbery in terrorem, to prevent a pursuit, Lowther contrived a sort of a certificate, which he directed the master to shew to their consort, if they should meet with her, and upon sight of it the brigantine would pass unmolested. This consort, he pretended, was a 40-gun ship, and cruising thereabouts. After this, the delivery proceeded to Hispaniola, where, near the west end of the island, she met with a French sloop, loaden with wine and brandy. Aboard of this vessel went Captain Massey as a merchant, and asked the price of one thing and then another, bidding money for the greatest part of the cargo. But after he had trifled a while, he whispered a secret in the
This is
French
so
man's
good, dude.
ear,
These are cool as
that
fuck.
they must have it all without money. Monsieur presently understood his meaning, and unwillingly agreed to the bargain. They
All right,
took out of her
do
30
this
casks of
operation
brandy,
on all of them,
5
and then go
hogsheads
back
of wine,
through
several pieces of chintzes,
and
and
do
other
the
valuable goods,
teeth
and
and the
about
eyes.
70 pounds English in money, of which
Teeth,
Lowther
eyes,
generously
and
returned
cleanup.
5
And
pounds
we're
back
almost
to the
done,
French
man.
master
This is
for
cool.
his civilities.
Cool, cool, cool. It's
As
cool,
all
cool,
constitutions
cool.
grow old, and thereby shake and totter, so did our Commonwealth in about a month of its age, feel
It's
commotions and
kind of
intestine
awesome.
disturbances by the divisions of its members, which had near hand terminated in its destruction. These civil discords were owing to the following
I love
occasion.
it.
Captain Massey had been a soldier almost from his infancy, but was but very indifferently acquainted with maritime affairs, and having an enterprising soul, nothing would satisfy him but he must be doing business his own way. Therefore he required Lowther to let him have 30 hands to land with, and he would attack the French settlements, and bring aboard the devil and all of plunder. Lowther did all that he could do, and said all that he could say to dissuade Massey from so rash and dangerous an attempt, pointing out to him the hazard the company would run, and the consequences to them all if he should not succeed, and the little likelihood there was to expect success from the undertaking. But 'twas all one for that, Massey would go and attack the French settlements for anything Lowther could say against it, so that he was obliged to propose the matter to the company, among whom Massey found a few fellows as resolute as himself. However, a great majority being against it, the affair was overruled in opposition to Captain Massey, notwithstanding which Massey grew fractious, quarrelled with Lowther, and the men divided into parties, some siding with the land pirate, and some with the sea rover, and were all ready to fall together by the ears, when the man at the masthead cried out, "A sail! A sail!" Then they gave over the dispute, set all their sails, and steered after the chase. In a few hours they came up with her, she being a small ship from Jamaica, bound to England. They took what they thought fit out of her, and a hand or two, and then Lowther was for sinking the ship, with several passengers that were in her, for what reason I know not. But Massey, so that he interposed, prevented their cruel fate, and the ship safely arrived afterwards in England. The next day they took a small sloop, an interloping trader which they detained with her cargo. All this while Massey was uneasy, and declared his resolution to leave them, and Lowther, finding him a very troublesome man to deal with, consented that he should take the sloop last made prize of, with what hands had a mind to go with them, and shift for himself. Whereupon Massey, with about 10 more malcontents, goes aboard the sloop, and comes away in her directly for Jamaica. Notwithstanding what had passed, Captain Massey puts a bold face upon the matter, and goes to Sir Nicholas Laws, the governor, informs him of his leaving Lowther the pirate, owns that he had assisted in going off with the ship at the river Gambia, but said 'twas to save so many of his Majesty's subjects from perishing, and his design was to return to England, but Lowther, conspiring with the greater part of the company, went a-pirating with the ship, and that he had taken this opportunity to leave him, and surrender himself and vessel to his excellency. Massey was very well received by the governor, and had his liberty given him, with a promise of his favor and so forth, and, at his own request, he was sent on board the Happy sloop, Captain Laws, to cruise off Hispaniola for Lowther. But not being so fortunate as to meet with him, Captain Massey returned back to Jamaica in the sloop, and getting a certificate and a supply of money from the governor, he came home passenger to England. When Massey came to town, he writes a long letter to the deputy governor and directors of the African Company, wherein he imprudently relates the whole transactions of his voyage, the going off with the ship, and the acts of piracy he had committed with Lowther, but excuses it as rashness and inadvertency in himself, occasioned by his being ill-used, contrary to the promises that had been made him, and the expectations he had entertained, but owned that he deserved to die for what he had done, Yet if they had generosity enough to forgive him, as he was still capable to do them service as a soldier, so he should be very ready to do it. But if they resolved to prosecute him, he begged only this favor, that he might not be hanged like a dog, but to die like a soldier, as he had been bred from his childhood, that is, that he might be shot. This was the substance of the letter, which, however, did not produce so favorable an answer as he hoped for, word being brought back to him that he should be fairly hanged. Whereupon Massey resolved not to be out of the way, when he found what important occasion there was likely to be for him, but takes a lodging in Aldersgate Street. The next day went to the Lord Chief Justice's chambers, and inquired if my lord had granted a warrant against Captain John Massey for piracy. But being told by the clerks that they knew of no such thing, he informed them he was the man, that my lord would soon be applied to for that purpose, and the officer might come to him at such a place where he lodged. They took the directions in writing, and in a few days, a warrant being issued, the tipstaff went directly by his own information and apprehended him, without any other trouble than walking to his lodging. There was then no person in town to charge him with any fact upon which he could be committed, nor could the letter be proved to be of his handwriting, so that they had been obliged to let him go again, if he had not helped his accusers out at pinch. The magistrate was reduced to the putting of his question to him, "Did you write this letter?" He answered he did, and not only that, but confessed all the contents of it, upon which he was committed to Newgate, but was afterwards admitted to £100 bail, or thereabouts. On the 5th of July, 1723, he was brought to his trial at a court of admiralty held at the Old Bailey, when Captain Russell, Governor Whitney's son, and others appeared as evidences, by whom the indictment was plainly proved against him, which, if it had not been done, the captain was of such an heroic spirit that he would have denied nothing. For instead of making a defense, he only entertained the court with a long narrative of his expedition, from the first setting out to his return to England, mentioning 2 acts of piracy committed by him which he was not charged with, often challenging the evidences to contradict him, if in anything he related the least syllable of an untruth, and instead of denying the crime set forth in the indictment, he charged himself with various circumstances which fixed the facts more home upon him. Upon the whole, the captain was found guilty, received sentence of death, and was executed 3 weeks after at Execution Dock. End of Chapter 12, Part 1. Chapter 12, Part 2 of the General History of the Pirates, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rain. The General History of the Pirates, Volume 1, by Charles Johnson. Chapter 12, Part 2. We return now to Lowther, whom we left cruising off Hispaniola, from whence he plied to windward, and near Puerto Rico chased 2 sail and spoke with them. They proving to be a small Bristol ship, commanded by Captain Smith, and a Spanish pirate, who had made prize of the said ship. Lowther examined into the Spaniards' authority for taking an English vessel, and threatened to put every man of them to death for so doing, so that the Spaniards fancied themselves to be in a very pitiful condition, till matters cleared up, and they found their masters as great rogues as themselves, from whom some mercy might be expected in regard to the near relation they stood with them, as to their profession. In short, Lowther first rifled and then burned both ships, sending the Spaniards away in their launch, and turning all the English sailors into pirates.
It smells like Vicks
After a
Vapor
few
Rub.
days' cruise, Lowther took a small
What is
sloop
that?
belonging to St. Christopher's, which they manned and carried along with them to a small island, where they cleaned and stayed some time to take their diversions, which consisted in unheard of
It's a little
debaucheries,
weird.
with
Maybe
drinking,
it's
swearing, and
mineral
rioting,
spirits and shit.
in which there seemed to be a kind of
Possible
emulation
that
among
that's
them,
what that is.
resembling
I
rather
don't care
devils
for it.
than men,
Whatever it is, I don't like it.
striving who should outdo one another in new invented oaths and execrations.
New invented
They all went
oaths
forth
and
about
execrations.
Christmas, observing neither
Great
times
phrase.
nor seasons for
That's what we're
perpetrating
doing.
their villainous actions, and sailed towards the Bay of Honduras.
This.
But
That's what we're
stopping
doing
at the
to
Grand
every
Cape
one of
into
them.
the water, they met with a small vessel with 13
We're doing
hands,
optic
in the
nerve,
same honorable
nose, and
employment with
cheeks on
themselves.
all, and then
The
we're going
captain
back
of this
through
gang
and we're
was
going
one
to do
Edward
teeth and
Lowe,
eyes.
whom we shall particularly discourse of in a chapter by
Teeth
itself.
and eye sockets.
Lowther received them as friends and
George
treated them
Lowther
with
is a
all
bad
imaginable
dude.
respect, inviting them, as they were few
I don't
in
like him.
number and in no condition to pursue
Don't
the
know him,
account,
but he sounds
as
like
they
a
called
terrible
it,
guy.
to join their strength together, which on the consideration aforesaid was accepted of. Lowther
There's that
stood
cute
in
little
great
cat. Look at
commander,
her.
and Low was
Isn't
made
she adorable?
lieutenant. The vessel the new pirates came out of, they sunk, and the Confederates proceed on the voyage as Lowther before intended. The 10th of January, the pirates came into the bay and fell upon a ship of 200 ton, called the Greyhound, Benjamin Edwards commander,
Let's go.
belonging to Boston.
Next.
Lowther hoisted his piratical colors and fired a gun
Hoist
for the
his
Greyhound to
piratical
bring to,
colors. They look like
which
this,
she
probably.
refusing, the Happy Delivery, the name of the pirate, edged down and gave her a broadside, which was returned by Captain Edwards very bravely,
this.
and the engagement held for an hour. But Captain Edwards, finding the pirate too strong for him, and fearing the consequence of too obstinate a resistance against
Do not put
those
up too
lawless
obstinate
fellows,
a
ordered
resistance,
his ensign to
sir.
be struck.
Sirrah.
The pirate's boat came aboard, and not only rifled the ship, but whipped, beat, and cut the men in a cruel manner,
Rude.
turned them aboard their own ship, and then set fire to theirs.
Rude.
In cruising about the bay, they met and took several other vessels without any resistance, viz. 2 brigantines of Boston and New England, one of which they burnt and sunk the other,
Rude.
a sloop belonging to Connecticut,
You guys are
Captain Aaron,
dicks.
which they also burnt,
I don't like
a
him.
sloop of Jamaica, Captain Hamilton, they took for their own use, a
No,
sloop of
that's-
Virginia they unladed, and was so generous as to give her back to the master that owned her.
Oh.
They took a sloop
Well,
of
that's
100
nice.
ton, belonging to Rhode Island, which they were pleased to keep, and mount with 8 carriage and 10 swivel guns.
Aha!
With this little fleet, viz. Admiral Lowther and the Happy Delivery, Captain Lowe in the Rhode Island sloop, Captain Harris, who was second mate in the Greyhound when taken, in Hamilton's sloop, and the little sloop formerly mentioned serving as a
And you know what?
tender.
I don't need it
I
for
say
the
with
cheeks.
this
I'm
fleet,
just
the
going to
pirates
paint the
left the bay
cheeks.
and came to Port Mayo in the
Right.
Gulf of Matique, and there made preparations to careen. They carried ashore all their sails and made tents by the waterside, wherein they laid their plunder, stores, etc., and fell to work. And at the time that the ships were upon the heel,
Look at
and
that.
the good
That's
folks
pretty good,
employed
right?
in heaving down,
There you go.
scrubbing, towelling,
That's pretty
and so
nice.
forth,
That's all you
of a
gotta
sudden
do.
came down a
Nothing to it,
considerable
man.
body of the
It's
natives
easy.
and attacked the pirates
Look how
unprepared.
easy that is.
As they were in no condition to defend themselves, they fled to their sloops, leaving them masters of the field and the spoil thereof, which was of great value, and set fire to the Happy
That's so
Delivery, their
nice.
capital
Look at
ship.
that.
Lowther made the best provision he could in the largest sloop, which he called the Ranger, having 10
The
guns
Ranger,
and 8
of course.
swivels.
May God bless
And
you,
she
Ranger.
sailing best,
I
accompanied
don't
by
mean Lowther
board
Sloop,
of her
I mean
and
my
13
cat
others.
ranger who was the...
Provisions
perhaps
was
the
now
greatest
very
cat
short,
who's ever
which, with
lived.
the late loss, put them in a confounded
He's a
ill humor,
great little cat.
insomuch that they were every now and then going together by the ears,
He's a wonderful
laying
cat.
blame of their ill conduct sometimes upon one, then upon another. The beginning of May, 1722, they got to the West Indies, and near the island of Desiada took a brigantine, one
So
paying
you do the
master,
cheeks
that afforded
independent.
them what
You'll
they
do
stood in
the
need of, which put
nose.
them in better temper,
You
and
paint the
business
nose
seemed to go
as
on
a
well
stencil,
again.
but
After they had pretty well plundered the brigantine, they sent her to the bottom. They went
that's
to the
rude.
waters
Stop
and then
sinking
stood to
these
the
goddamn
north,
ships, dude. I
intending
want to
to
see
visit
them.
the main coast of America.
Like, if you hadn't sunk so many of them, you fuckers, we'd have more sloops and stuff around today.
Captain Smith, bound thither from St. Christopher's.
Right?
At the
But
taking
we're-
of this
we have a
vessel, the crews
dearth of
divided. For
good
lo,
sailing
Lowe
sloops
joined
from
in
the
Grand
18th
Caymans,
century.
proving
Is there
almost
any
an
extant
unruly member of the
sailing sloop of the
Commonwealth,
18th
always
century?
aspiring and
No,
never
because the
satisfied with the
fucking
proceedings
pirates
of the
sank them
commander.
all.
He thought it the safest way to get rid of him, upon any terms, and according to the vote of the company, they parted the bear skin between them. Lowe with 44 hands went aboard the brigantine, and Lowther with the same number stayed in the sloop, and separated that very night, being the 28th of May, 1722.
Stop
Lowther,
sinking
proceeding on his way to
ships,
the main
you
coast,
dick.
took 3 or 4 fishing
I don't
vessels
like
off
it.
New York, which was no great booty to the captors. The
Hey,
third
Professor,
day,
what's
they met
another
with a
name
small
for
New
pirate's
England ship,
treasure?
bound home from
I believe the
Barbados,
word is
which stood an
booty.
attack a small time, but finding it to no purpose, yielded herself a prey to the booters. The pirates took out of her 14 hogsheads of rum,
Yep.
6 barrels of sugar,
Just carry on
a
like
large
this
box of
all the way
English
through.
ones,
Get all
several
of them done
casks
like
of loaf
this.
sugar, a considerable quantity of pepper,
Tearses.
6 negroes, besides a sum of money and plate, and then let her go on her voyage.
Okay.
The next adventure was not so fortunate for them, for coming pretty near the coast of South Carolina, they met with a ship just come out on her voyage to England. Lowther gave her a gun
Three.
and hoisted
Alright,
his
so these are
piratical
good. Now
colors.
we're going to flip them
But this
around.
ship, which was called the Amy, happening to have a brave, gallant man to command her,
Right?
who
We're
was
gonna
not
flip these
anyways
around.
daunted with that terrible ensign, the black flag.
Oh,
He,
damn it.
instead of striking immediately as was expected,
Okay, I
let
need
fly a
more.
broadside at the pirate. Lowther, not at all pleased with the compliment, though he put up with it for the present, was for taking leave. With the Amy getting the pirate between
We're
her
going
and the
on
shore,
large pieces of
having
tape
him to
here.
clap him aboard.
Enough of this
Within
economy.
which Lowther
The
won
economy
the ground
is a
and
false
landed all the
economy.
men with their arms. Captain Watkins, the captain of the Amy, was obliged to stand off for fear of running his own ship ashore, but at the same time thought fit for the public good to destroy the enemy, and thereupon went into the boat and rowed towards the sloop in order to set her on fire.
Oh,
But before he
really?
reached the vessel, a fatal shot from Lowther's company ashore put an end to their design and Captain Watkins' life.
Look at that.
After this unfortunate blow, the mate returned aboard with the
What's that look
boat,
like?
and not being inclined to
Looks
pursue
pretty
any
rad.
further, took charge of the ship.
So I'm going to let these set for just a few minutes, and then we're going to flip them over. We're
And brought all
going to
his
do
men
the back
aboard again,
sides,
but
then
was
we
in
do
a
the
poor
teeth
shattered condition,
and the
having
eye
suffered
sockets.
much in the engagement.
And I think that's it. Maybe a little touch up on the bone, the long bones,
He made shift to get into an inlet
and some
somewhere in
final
North
touch up.
Carolina,
But
where he
I
stayed a
think
long
this is
while before
largely
he was able to
complete.
put to sea again. He and his crew laid up all winter and shifted as well as they could among the woods, divided themselves into small parties, and hunted generally in the daytimes, killing of black cattle, hogs, etc. for their subsistence, and in the night retired to their tents and huts, which they made for lodging. And sometimes when the weather grew very cold, they would stay aboard of their sloop. In the spring of the year 1723, they made shift to get to sea, and steered their course for Newfoundland, and upon the banks took a schooner called the Swift, John Hood, master. They found a good quantity of provisions aboard her, which they very much wanted at that time, and after taking 3 of their hands, and plundering her of what they thought fit, they let her depart. They took several other vessels upon the banks, and in the harbor, but none of any great account, and then steering for a warmer climate, in August arrived at the West Indies. In their passage thither they met with a brigantine, called the John and Elizabeth, Richard Stanley master, bound for Boston, which they plundered, took 2 of her men, and discharged her. Lowther cruised a pretty while among the islands without any extraordinary success, and was reduced to a very small allowance of provisions, till they had the luck to fall in with a Martinico man, which proved a seasonable relief to them. And after that, a Guinea man had the ill fortune to become a prey to the
There you go.
rovers.
Right?
She was called the Princess. Captain Wickstead
So we're
commanded.
going to flip these over.
It
We're
was now
going to
thought
do the
necessary
back
to look out
sides,
for a place to clean their sloop
and then
in,
it's just
and prepare
eye
for new
sockets and
adventures.
teeth.
Accordingly, the
And
island
then
of
touch
Blanco
up.
was pitched upon for
And
that
then we're done.
purpose, which lies in the latitude of 11
After
degrees
that,
50 minutes
it's
north,
weathering.
about 30 leagues from the
Pretty
main of
nice.
Spanish America, between the islands of Margarita
See
and
them.
Rocas.
I'm real happy with these, man. I think they look cool.
It is a low, even island, but healthy and dry, uninhabited, and about 2 leagues in circumference, with plenty of lignum vitae trees thereon, growing in spots with shrubby bushes of other wood about them. There are, besides turtle, great numbers of guanos, which is an amphibious creature, like a lizard, but much larger, the body of it being as big as a
The
man's
iguana.
leg. They are very
Guanos.
good to eat, and are much
Iguana.
used by the pirates that come here.
I've never eaten
They are
iguana.
of diverse colors, but such as live upon dry ground, as here at Blanco, are commonly yellow. On the northwest end of this island, there is a small cove or sandy bay. All around the rest of the island is deep water, and steep close to the island. Here Lowther resorted to, the beginning of October last, unrigged his sloop, sent his guns, sail,
I'm
rigging,
pretty
etc.
pleased with
ashore,
these. They look
and
good.
put his vessel upon the careen. The Eagle sloop of Barbados, belonging to the South Sea Company with 35 hands, commanded by Walter Moore, coming near this island in her voyage to Comena on the Spanish continent,
Right?
saw the said sloop just careened, with her guns out and sails unbent, which she supposed to be a pirate, because it was a place where traders did not commonly use, so took the advantage of attacking her, as she was then unprepared. The Eagle having fired a gun to oblige her to shew her colors, the pirate hoisted the St. George's flag at their topmost mast, as it were to bid defiance to her. But when they found Moore and his crew resolved to board them in good earnest, the pirates cut their cable and hauled their stern on shore, which obliged the Eagle to come to anchor and thwart their hawse, where she engaged them till they called for quarter and struck, at which time Lowther and 12 of the crew made their escape out the cabin window.
Huh.
The master master of the Eagle got the pirate sloop off, secured her, and went ashore with 25 hands in pursuit of Lowther and his gang. But after 5 days' search, they could find but 5 of them, which they brought aboard, and then proceeded with the sloop and pirates to Comena aforesaid, where they soon arrived. The Spanish governor, being informed of this brave action, condemned the sloop to the captors, and sent a small sloop with 23 hands to scour the bushes and other places of the island of Blanco for the pirates that remained there, and took 4 more with 7 small arms, leaving behind them Captain Lowther, 3 men, and a little boy which they could not take. The above 4 the Spaniards tried and condemned to slavery for life, 3 to the galleys and the other to the castle of Auraria. The Eagle sloop brought all their prisoners afterwards to St. Christopher's, where the following were tried by a court of vice-admiralty, there held March the 11th, 1722, viz. John Churchill, Edward MacDonald, Nicholas Lewis, Richard West, Sam Levercott,
I think what I want to do is pull in just a little bit into the shaded part of the eye socket and half moon,
Matthew Freebarn,
just to shade it
Henry Watson,
and get it some depth, but I want to pull in just a little bit so it starts out shaded
the last
and
3
then
were
deep,
acquitted. The other 13
and
were
then it
found
fades
guilty, 2 of which were recommended to mercy
So
by the court,
that's what we're going
and
to try.
accordingly pardoned,
And then I have to paint the
and the
teeth,
rest
so it's eye
executed
sockets
at
and
that
teeth on
island
the
on the
next
20th of the
pass.
same month. As for Captain Lowther, it is said that he afterwards shot himself upon that fatal island where his piracies ended, being found by some sloop's men dead and a pistol burst by his side. End of chapter 12, part 2.
Chapter 13, Part 1 of The General History of the Pirates, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording.
Quick, get
All
interesting.
LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer,
Don't care.
please visit
Tell me something interesting.
LibriVox.org. The General History of the Pirates, Volume 1 by Charles Johnson, Chapter 13, Part 1. Of Captain Edward Lowe and his crew. Edward
When
Lowe
these
was
are done,
born
I'm going to go
Westminster
hang them
and
outside
had
in
his
the wind
education
on
there, such as it
the
was, for
laundry
he could
lines
neither write or read.
and just let them go.
Nature seemed to have designed him for a pirate from his childhood, for very early he began the trade of plundering, and was wont to raise contributions among all the boys of Westminster. And if any were bold enough to refuse it, a battle was the consequence. But Lowe was so hardy, as well as bold, there was no getting the better of him, so that he robbed the youths of their farthings with impunity. When he grew bigger, he took to gaming in a low way, for it was commonly among the footmen in the lobby of the House of Commons, where he used to play the whole game, as they term it, that is, cheat all he could, and those who pretended to dispute it with him must fight him. The virtues of some of his family were equal to his. One of his brothers was a youth of genius. When he was but 7 years old, he used to be carried in a basket upon a porter's back into a crowd and snatch hats and wigs. According to the exact chronology of Newgate, he was the first who practiced this ingenious trick. After this, he applied himself to picking of pockets. When he increased in strength, he attempted greater things, such as house-breaking in company. But after he had run a short race, he had the misfortune of ending his days at Tyburn, in company with Stephen Bunce and the celebrated Jack Hall the chimney sweeper. But to return to Ned, when he came to man's estate, at his eldest brother's desire, he went to sea with him, and so continued 3 or 4 years, and then parted. And Ned worked in a rigging house in Boston in New England for a while. About 6 years ago, he took a trip home to England to see his mother, who was yet living. His stay was not long here, but taking leave of his friends and acquaintance for the last time, he should see them, for so he was pleased to say. He returned to Boston and worked a year or 2 longer at the rigging business, but being too apt to disagree with his masters, he left them and shipped himself in a sloop that was bound to the Bay of Honduras.
When
the sloop arrived in the bay, Ned Lowe was appointed patron of the boat, which was employed in cutting of logwood and bringing it aboard to lade the ship, for that is the commodity they make the voyage for. In the boat were 12 men besides Lowe, who all go armed because of the Spaniards, from whom this logwood is but little better than stole. It happened that the boat one day came aboard just before dinner was ready, and Lowe desired that they might stay and dine. But the captain, being in a hurry for his lading, ordered them a bottle of rum and to take the other trip, because no time should be lost. This provoked the boat's crew, but particularly Lowe, who takes up a loaded musket and fires at the captain, but missing him, shot another poor fellow through the head, then put off the boat, and with his 12 companions goes to sea. The next day they took a small vessel and go in her, make a black flag, and declare war against all the
You
world.
cannot but make a black flag. You make the black flag and there you go. You're off to war.
Intending to have fitted up their small vessel
Ostis
and prepared
humanus
themselves
generi.
as well as their circumstances were permit for their honorable employment. But falling in company with George Lowther, another pirate there, who paying his compliments to Lowe, as great folks do to one
Let
another
us
when they
proceed.
meet,
So I'm
and
going to
offering
take this.
himself as an
I
ally,
want
Lowe accepted
I'm gonna
of
put
the
3
terms,
towels
and so the
down
treaty
just
was
to
presently
act as a
signed
blotter.
without plenipose or any other formalities.
We're just going to
We've
block.
already given an account of their
But
joint
then we're going to go
piracies under
on
Lowther as chief commander
just
until the
the
28th
skull
of May
and do it.
1722.
Do it now, and then you
when
can
they
do
took a brigantine of
the rest of
Boston
it.
bound thither
Right.
from St. Christopher's, at which time they parted, and
Right.
Edward Lowe
There you
went
go.
into the brigantine with
That's all you
40
gotta
more
do.
others, who chose him their captain.
Glasses.
They took with them 2 guns, 4
Mask.
swivels, 6 quarter casks of powder, provisions, and some stores, and so left Lowther to prosecute his adventures with the men he had left. Their first adventure in the brigantine was on Sunday, the 3rd day of June, when they took a vessel belonging to Amboy,
Okay, here we
John
go.
Hance, master, whom he rifled of his provisions and let go. The same day he met with a sloop, James Calhoun, master, off of Rhode Island, bound into that port, whom he first plundered and then cut away his bowsprit and all
What a
his
dick.
rigging, also
The guy's
his
a
sails
jerk,
from the
man.
yards, and wounded the master to prevent his getting in to give intelligence, and then stood away to southeastward with all the sail he could make, there being but little wind. Lowe
What a
judged right
jerk.
making sail from the coast, for a longer stay had proved fatal to him, for notwithstanding the disabled condition he had rendered the sloop in, she made shift to get into Block Island at
There you go.
12 o'clock that night, and
What's that?
immediately dispatched a whaleboat to Rhode Island, which got thither by 7 the next morning, with an account of the pirate, his force, and what had happened to him. As soon as the governor had received this information, he ordered a drum to beat up for volunteers, and 2 of the best sloops then in the harbor to be fitted out. He gave commissions to one Captain John Headland and Captain John Brown for 10 days. The former had 8 guns and 2 swivels, and the latter 6 guns, well fitted with small arms, and in both sloops 140 stout fellows. All this was performed with so much expedition that before sunset they were under sail. Turning out of the harbor at the same time the pirate was seen from Block Island, which gave great hopes that the sloops would be masters of her the next day, which however did not happen, for the sloops returned into harbor some days afterwards without so much as seeing their enemy. After this escape, Captain Lowe went into port upon the coast, for he had not fresh water enough to run to the islands, where he stayed a few days getting provisions and what necessaries the crew wanted, and then sailed for purchase, as they call it, steering their course towards Marblehead. About the 12th of July, the brigantine sailed into the harbor of Port Rosemary, and there found 13 ships and vessels, but none of force and anchor. They spread their black flag and ran in among them.
Spread the black flag and run in among them.
They should have no quarters if they resisted. In the meantime, they manned and armed their boat and took possession of every one of them, plundered them of what they thought fit, and converted one to their own use, a schooner of 80 tons, aboard of which they put 10 carriage guns and 50 men, and Lowe himself went captain, and named her the Fancy, making one Charles Harris, who was at first forced into their service out of the Greyhound of Boston by Lowther, of which ship Harris was second mate, captain of the brigantine. Out of these vessels they took several hands and increased the company to 80 men,
Right?
who all
There you
signed
go.
the articles, some willing, and a few perhaps by force,
I
and
need
so
some
sailed
more
away from
longer
Marblehead.
tapes. I'm not messing around with these
Sometime after
economical
this, they
little bitty
took
tapes.
sloops
We're going
bound
for
for
big
Boston
tapes.
with provisions first attacked them, but there happening to be an officer and some soldiers on board who gave them a warm reception, Lowe chose to stay till he should be joined by the brigantine. In the meanwhile, the sloops made the best of their way, and the pirates gave them chase 2 days, and at last lost sight of them in
Alright,
fog.
let's do the big one.
They now steered for the Leeward Islands, but in their voyage met with such a hurricane of wind that the like had not been known. The sea ran mountains high and seemed to
Mountains
threaten
high.
them every moment with destruction. It was no time now to look out for plunder, but to save themselves, if possible, from perishing. All hands were continually employed night and day on board the brigantine, and all little enough, for the waves went over her, so that they were forced to keep the pump constantly going, besides bailing with buckets. But finding themselves not able to keep her free, and seeing the utmost danger before their eyes, they turned to the tackle, and hoisted out their provisions and other heavy goods, and threw them overboard, with 6 of their guns, so that by lightening the vessel she might rise to the top of the sea with the waves. They were also going to cut away their mast, but considering how dangerous it would be to be left in such a condition, they resolved to delay it to the last, which was prudence in them to do. For a ship without masts or sails lies like a log upon the water, and if attacked must fight with disadvantage, the working of her being the most artful part of the engagement, because she may sometimes bring all her great guns on one side to bear on her enemy, when the disabled ship can do little or nothing. But to proceed, by throwing overboard their heavy goods, the vessel made considerable less water, and they could keep it under with the pump only, which gave them hopes and new life, so that instead of cutting all away, they took necessary measures to secure the mast by making preventer shrouds and company, and then wore and lay to upon the other tack till the storm was over.
There you go.
The schooner made somewhat better weather of it.
There you go, you fuckers.
But she was pretty
Let's
roughly
turn her over.
handled, notwithstanding, having split her mainsail, sprung her
That's
bolster,
pretty good.
cut her anchors
That's
from her
pretty
bows.
fucking rad.
The
That's what it is.
brigantine, by running away to leeward when she wore upon the larboard tack, had lost sight of the schooner. But not knowing whether she might be safe or not, as soon as the wind abated, she
So we're
set
just
her
gonna
mainsail and
smooth this out. I don't want any.
and made short trips
I don't
to
want any
windward,
indication
and
of
the
the
next day
stenciling.
had the good fortune to come in sight of their consort,
Smooth it out.
who,
So
upon a
we're gonna
signal,
do that.
which the
Now
other
we're
knew,
going for
bore
toofs.
down to her, and the crew
We're
were
gonna go for the
overjoyed
teeth.
to meet again after such ill treatment from the
And
winds
I
and
need to
seas.
now go for.
After the storm, Lowe got safe to a small island, one of the weathermost of the Caribbees, and there fitted
I
their
wanna
vessels
plug this in
as
and
well
get
as the
charging.
place could afford.
Well,
They
this
got
is at
provisions
100,
of the
so
natives
there we
in
go.
exchange for
So let's
goods
plug
of
this
their
one
own,
in.
And as soon as the brigantine was
We're almost
ready,
done.
'twas judged necessary to
And
take
it's
a short
cool.
cruise and leave the schooner in the harbor till her return.
It's cool.
The
It's cool.
brigantine
It's cool.
sailed out accordingly
There we
and
go.
had not been out many
There's that.
days before they met a ship at
Now,
sea that had lost all
let
her
us
masts,
take.
on board of whom they went and took her in money and
What I
goods
want
to the value
is-
of 1,000 pounds.
I want to know what the.
And so left her in the
teeth-
condition they found her. This ship was bound
I'm gonna
home
go
from Barbados,
upper left
losing her masts in the late storm,
on the
was
eyes,
making for Antigua to refit, where
and then
afterwards she
teeth.
arrived.
We're going in dark.
The storm just spoken
We're gonna
of
go
was
in
bound to have
dark
done
strokes just
incredible
to-
damage in those
Just
parts
to
of the
tighten
world.
them up,
But however,
so
it
straight
appeared to have
down,
been more violent at
right? So it
Jamaica.
goes down and to the
Both
left,
the
like
island
little
and
hooks
shipping.
here,
There was such a prodigious swell
and
of sea
then
that
hook,
several
then
hundred
down,
tons of stones
hook and
and
down,
rocks
hook
were
and down.
thrown over the wall
So
of
just
the town of Port Royal.
hooking down,
And
like
the town
you're
itself
gonna
was
start at
overflowed,
the,
and
like
about
you
half
can't see that,
destroyed.
but we're gonna
There
hook
being
over
the
and
next
down,
morning 5
hook
foot
over and
water
down,
from one end to the other.
hook over and down,
The
and
cannon
then
of Fort
hook down and
Charles
over.
were
So
dismounted and
we're gonna go
launched into the
right to
sea,
left
and 400
this way
people
on
lost
that
their
with a
lives.
fine brush.
A more melancholy sight was scarce ever seen when
Let's
the water ebbed
try
away.
it and see
All the
what she
streets
looks
being
like.
covered with ruins of houses, wrecks of vessels, and a great number of dead bodies.
God bless them all.
40 sail of ships in the harbor were cast away.
Oh my word. So
The
let's.
brigantine returned to the island where she had left the schooner, who being ready to sail, it was put to the vote of the company what voyage to take next. And herein they followed the advice of the captain, who thought it not advisable to go any farther to leeward because of the men of war who were cruising in their several stations, which they were not at all fond of meeting, and therefore it was agreed to go to the Azores, or Western Islands. The lying there. V, the Nostradam, Mare d'Iden, Captain Roach, Commander. The Dove, Captain Cox. The Rose Pink, formerly of Man of War, Captain Thompson. Another English ship, Captain Chandler, and 3 other vessels. He threatened all with present death who resisted, which struck such a terror to them that they yielded themselves up a prey to the villains without firing a gun. The pirates being in great want of water and fresh provisions, Lowe sent to the governor of St. Michael's for a supply and promised upon that condition to release the ships he had taken, but otherwise to burn them all, which demand the governor thought it not prudent to refuse, but sent the provision he required, upon which he released 6 of the ships, after he had plundered of them what he thought fit, and the other, V, the Rose Pink, was made a pirate ship, which Lowe himself took command of. The pirates took several of the guns out of the French ship and mounted them aboard the Rose, which proved very fit for their turn, and condemned the former to the flames. They took all of the crew out of her, but the cook, who they said, being a greasy fellow, would fry well in the fire. So the poor man was bound to the mainmast and burnt in the ship.
God bless him.
No small diversion of Lowe and his myrmidons. Lowe ordered the schooner to lie in the fair between St. Michael's and St. Mary's, where, about the 20th of August, Captain Carter, in the right galley, had the ill fortune to come in her way. And because at first they showed inclination to defend themselves and what they had, the pirates cut and mangled them in a barbarous manner, particularly some Portuguese passengers, 2 of which, being friars, they triced up at each arm of the foreyard, but let them down again before they were quite dead, and this they repeated several times out of sport. Another Portuguese, who was also Captain Carter's passenger, putting on a sorrowful countenance at what he saw acted, one of this vile crew attacked him upon the deck, saying he did not like his looks, and thereupon gave him a blow across his belly with his cutlash that cut out his bowels, and he fell down dead without speaking a word. At the same time, another of these rogues, cutting out a prisoner, missed his mark, and Captain Lowe, standing in the way, very opportunely received the stroke upon his under jaw, which laid the teeth bare. Upon this, the surgeon was called, who immediately stitched up the wound. But Lowe, finding fault with the operation, the surgeon being tolerably drunk, as it was customary for everybody to be, struck Lowe such a blow with his fist that broke out all the stitches, and then bid him sew up his chops himself and be damned. So
yeah, Lowe.
made a very pitiful figure for some time after.
Tool.
When they had plundered Captain Carter's ship, several of them were
there you go.
Her as they had done the French man.
Right.
But it was otherwise resolved
Stitch the
at
teeth.
last. For after they had cut her cables, rigging, and sails to pieces, they left her to the mercy of the sea. After these depredations, they steered for the island of Madeira, where, missing other booty, they took up with a fishing boat.
Professor, what's another name for pirate's treasure?
One of which they detained
I
on
believe the
board
word
and
is booty.
sent the other ashore with a flag of truce, demanding a boat of water of the governor on pain of taking away the old man's life, whom they threatened to hang at the yardarm upon their refusal. But the thing being complied with, the old man was honorably, as the pirates say, discharged, and all 3 much handsomer clothed than when they took them. From this island they sailed to the Canaries, but meeting with no prey there, they continued their course for the Cape de Verde Islands, and at Bonavista took a ship called the Liverpool Merchant, Captain Goulding, from whom they stole a great quantity of provisions and dry goods, 300 gallons of brandy, 2 guns and carriages, a mast, yard, and hawsers, besides 6 of his men, and then would not let them trade there, nor at St. Nicholas, but obliged Captain Goulding to go with his ship to the Isle of May. The pirate also took among these islands a ship belonging to Liverpool, Scott commander, 2 Portuguese sloops bound for Brazil, a small English sloop trading there, James P.'s master, bound to Santa Cruz, and 3 sloops from St. Thomas bound to Curacao. The masters' names were Lilly, Staples, and Simpkins, all which they plundered and then let go about their business, except for 1 sloop which they fitted up for the following purpose. Lowe had heard by one of the above-mentioned ships that 2 small galleys were expected every day at the Western Islands, the Greyhound, Captain Glass, and the Joliffe, Captain Aram, the former of which was designed to be fitted for the piratical trade to Brazil, if things happened to their minds. They manned the sloop and sent her in quest of one or both of these ships to the Western Islands aforesaid, while they careened their ship Rose at one of the Cape de Verdes. But now fortune that had hitherto been so propitious to them left her minions and baffled for the present all their hopes, for the sloop missing of their prey was reduced to great necessities for want of provisions and water. So they ventured to go ashore at St. Michael's for a supply and pass for a trader. But they played their part so awkwardly that they were suspected by the governor to be what they really were.
Pirates!
He soon was put out of doubt by a visit some Portuguese made them, who happened unluckily to be the passengers in Captain Carter's ship when Lowe took her and knew the gentlemen's faces very well. Upon which the whole crew was conducted into the castle, where they were provided for as long as they lived. Lowe, in the meantime, did not fare quite so ill, but had his intended voyage to Brazil spoiled by the oversettling of his ship when she was upon the careen, whereby she was lost, so that he was reduced to his old schooner, which he called the Fancy, aboard of which they all went to the number of 100, as vile rogues as ever ended their lives at Tyburn. They proceeded now to the West Indies, but before they had gotten far on their voyage, they attacked a rich Portuguese ship called the Nostra Senhora de Victoria, bound home from Bahia, and after some resistance took her. Lowe tortured several of the men to make them declare where the money, which he supposed they had on board, lay, and extorted by that means a confession that the captain had, during the chase, hung out of the cabin window a bag with 11,000 more doors, which as soon as he was taken, he cut the rope off and let drop into the sea. Lowe, upon hearing what a prize had escaped him, raved like a fury, swore 1,000 oaths, and ordered the captain's lips to be cut off, which he broiled before his face, and afterwards murdered him and all the crew, being 32 persons. After this bloody action they continued their course till they came to the northward of all the islands, and there they cruised for about a month, in which time they made prizes of the following vessels, viz. A Snow from New York to Curacao, Robert Leonard Master, a sloop from the Bay, bound to New York, Craig Master, a Snow from London and Jamaica, bound to New York, and the Stanhope Pink, Andrew Delbridge Master, from Jamaica to Boston, which last they burnt because of Lowe's irreconcilable aversion to New England men. End of chapter 13, part 1. Recording by Kathleen Nelson, Austin, Texas, April 2010. Chapter 13, Part 2 of A General History of the Pirates, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 13, Part 2 of A General History of the Pirates, Volume 1 by Charles Johnson. After this cruise, they went into one of the islands and cleaned, and then steered for the Bay of Honduras, where they arrived about the middle of March 1722-3, and met a sloop turning out of the said bay. The pirates had hoisted up Spanish colors and continued them till they drew near the sloop. Then they hauled them down, hoisted their black flag, fired a broadside.
The black flag, hoist the black flag, and there you go.
A Spaniard of 6 guns and 70 men that came into the bay that morning, and meeting there with 5 English sloops and a Pink, made prizes of them all, plundered them, and brought the masters of the vessels away, prisoners, for the ransom of the logwood. Their names were Tuthill, Norton, Newberry, Sprayfort, Clark, and Parrott. The Spaniards made no resistance, so that the English pirates soon became their masters, and fell to rifling. But finding the above-mentioned people in the hold, and several English goods, they consulted Lowe the captain thereupon, and without examining any further, the resolution passed to kill all the company, and the pirates, without any ceremony, fell pell-mell to execution with swords, cutlashes, poleaxes, and pistols, cutting, slashing, and shooting the poor Spaniards at a sad rate. Some of the miserable creatures jumped down into the hold, but could not avoid the massacre. They met death everywhere, for if they escaped it from one hand, they were sure to perish by another. The only prospect they had of life was to fly from the rage of those merciless men, and to trust the more merciful sea. And accordingly, a great many leaped overboard and swam for the shore. But lo, perceiving it, ordered the canoa to be manned and sent in pursuit of them, by which means several of the poor unhappy men were knocked in the head in the water, as they were endeavoring to get to land. However, about 12 of them did reach the shore, but in a miserable condition, being very much wounded, and what became of them afterwards was not known, except one, who while the pirates were at their sports and pastime ashore, finding himself very weak and fainting with his wounds, and not knowing where to go for help and relief, in this extremity he came back to them and begged, for God's sakes, in the most earnest manner possible, that they would give him quarters. Upon which one of the villains took hold of him and said, God damn him, he would give him good quarters presently, and made the poor Spaniard kneel down on his knees, then taking his fusil, put the muzzle of it in his mouth, and fired down his throat.
God bless him.
'Twas thought the rest did not survive their miserable condition, and could only prolong their lives to add to the misery of them. When the murdering work was over, they rummaged the Spanish pirates and brought all the booty aboard their own vessels. The 6 masters aforementioned, found in the hold, they restored to their respective vessels. They forced away the carpenter from the deck, and then set fire to the Spanish sloop and burnt her, which last scene concluded the destruction of their enemy, ship, and crew. Lowe set the masters of the vessels free, but would not suffer them to steer for Jamaica, where they were then bound, for fear the men of war should get intelligence of them, but forced them all to go to New York, threatening them with death when they met them again if they refused to comply with their demands.
Okay, so
in the next cruise, which was
head
between
on,
the
it's okay.
Leeward
It's
Islands
just
and the Main, they took
looks a
2
little bit-
snows bound from
looks a
Jamaica
little
to
folded,
Liverpool,
but
and a snow from Jamaica
it's
to
okay that
London,
way.
Brid's master,
These
as
are good.
also a ship from Bedford
So
to
now-
Jamaica, John Pinkham commander, and 2 sloops from Jamaica to Virginia. On the 27th of May, Lowe and his consort Harris came off South Carolina and met with 3 good ships, the Crown,
you gotta carry on
Captain
with.
Lovering,
So this one's
the
done,
King
right?
William,
Have I
the
done it? Done
Carteret,
it?
and the
Is it complete
Brigantine,
done? I think
who
yeah,
all
it is.
came out of
So
Carolina
that one's complete.
together 2 days before. The pirates were at the trouble of chasing them, and Captain Lovering being the sternmost, she
that
fell a
one's
prey
not
into
done,
their hands, and they
Yeah, no,
spent
that
all
one's
the
not
day
done.
in coming
These
up
aren't
with
done.
the rest.
So that one
Within a few
is
days, they
complete.
took a ship called the Amsterdam Merchant, Captain
It only
Willard,
needs
from
touch-up now.
Jamaica, but belonging to New England.
The main
As
parts
Lowe
are
let none
complete.
of that country depart
It
without
is
some
now
marks of
time
his
to
rage, he cut
do-
off this gentleman's ears, slit
Do
out
those
his
2. I
nose,
want
and
the
cut him in
eyes and the
several
teeth. We're
places
just
of
doing
his
eyes and
body,
teeth.
and after plundering his
Yeah,
ship,
just do
let
eyes
him
and
pursue
teeth.
his voyage. After this, he took a sloop bound to Amboy, William Fraser master, with whom Mr. Lowe happening to be displeased, he ordered lighted matches to be tied between the men's fingers, which burnt all the flesh off the bones.
Rude.
He then cut them in several parts of their bodies with knives and cutlashes, afterwards took all their provisions away,
I don't like
and
this guy.
sent some of them ashore in an uninhabited part of the country. The Kingston, Captain Estwick, another ship, 1 Burrington master, 2 brigantines from Carolina to London, a sloop from Virginia to Bermudas, a ship from Glasgow to Virginia, a schooner from New York to South Carolina, a pink from Virginia to Dartmouth, and a sloop from Philadelphia to Suriname fell a prey to these villains upon this cruise, besides those above mentioned. It happened that at this time one of His Majesty's ships was upon a cruise on this station, and got intelligence of some of the mischievous actions of this miscreant by one of the vessels that had been plundered by him, who, steering as directed, came in sight of the pirates by break of day on the 10th of June, of all days in the year. The rovers, looking out for prey, soon saw and gave chase to the man-of-war, which was called the Greyhound, a ship of 20 guns and 120 men, rather inferior in force to the 2 pirate vessels. The greyhound, finding them so eager, was in no doubt what they should be, and therefore tacked and stood from them, giving the pirates an opportunity to chase her for 2 hours, till all things were in readiness for an engagement, and the pirates got gun shot. Then the greyhound tacked again and stood towards the 2 sloops, one of them called the Fancy, commanded by Low himself, and the other the Ranger, commanded by Harris, both which hoisted their piratical colors and fired each a gun. When the greyhound came within musket shot, she hauled up her mainsail and clapped close upon a wind to keep the pirates from running to leeward, and then engaged. But when the rogues found who they had to deal with, they edged away under the man-of-war's stern, and the greyhound, standing after them, they made a running fight for about 2 hours.
Okay.
But little wind happening, the sloops gained from her by the help of their oars, upon which the greyhound let off
These people are
firing and turned
ridiculous.
all hands to
Stop
her own
making
oars,
war, you
and at 3 in the
tards.
afternoon
Quit it.
came up with them.
Alright,
The
so
pirates hauled upon a wind
let's
to
do teeth and eye sockets.
and the fight was immediately renewed, with a brisk fire
and I think
on
we're
both
cooked
sides
then.
till the
But
Ranger's main
I have
gun was
2
shot
more,
down,
which is 4
and the
more
greyhound
skulls.
pressing close
So do
upon the
these, do
disabled sloop.
the eye sockets and
Low,
teeth.
in the other, thought fit to bear
And then
away
you're done.
and leave his consort a
You're done.
sacrifice to his enemy, who, seeing the cowardice and treachery
Yeah,
of his
I think
commodore
that's
and
it.
leader, having 10 or 12 men killed and wounded, and that there was no possibility of escaping, called out for quarters and surrendered themselves to justice, which proved severe enough to them a while
I
afterwards.
don't want to mess up our washing
The
machine, so
conduct
I'm
of
not
Low was
going to
surprising in this
run it
adventure,
until it's
because his
completely
renewed
dry.
courage and
So
boldness
I'm going to
had
go, as
hitherto
soon as these are done painted, I'm going to go
so
hang them on
minds of all
the laundry
people
lines
that he
outside.
became a terror, even to his own men. But his behavior throughout this whole action showed him to be a base, cowardly
Let them
villain.
dry overnight
For had
and
Low's
into
sloop
the
fought half
morning
so
through
briskly as
into the
Harris's had
afternoon
done,
tomorrow.
as they were under a solemn oath to do,
Make sure they're
the man
completely
of war,
dry.
in my opinion, could
And
never
then
have hurted them.
We're going to run
The
it through the
greyhound
washing
carried
machine
in
with
their
a
prize
bit
to
of
Rhode
dye,
Island, to the great
a little bit of
joy
brown,
the whole province,
tiny,
though
tiny,
Henry
like a few
Ward
drops of
the
black,
greyhound himself had graced
just to
the triumph.
just to
The prisoners were
drop
strongly
that,
secured
that
in a
brilliant
gale
white
until
down a
a
bit.
court of vice admiralty could be held for their trials.
But these are almost
which began
done.
on the 10th of
I'm
July
really
at
pleased.
Newport, and continued
And then I have
3 days.
to
The
do a
court was
cross stitch of my initials for
William Dummer,
Jorge in
Esquire, Lieutenant Governor
red
of
silk, if I can find
Massachusetts,
some. I think I have red silk.
Nathaniel Payne,
Well, he says red,
Esquire,
but I think I have red silk,
Abington
which is
Davenport,
how I prefer to do it.
Thomas Finch,
And I'll
Esquire,
do that and
Spencer Phipps,
sign it, and we're done.
Esquire, John Lechmere, Esquire, Surveyor General, John Valentine, Esquire.
When that's complete, I'm going to hang them up. I'm going to shoot a musket through them,
Cranston,
put a
Governor
musket
of
ball
Rhode
through them,
Island,
get some powder
John
burns on it,
Menzies,
and we're done.
Esquire, Judge of the Admiralty.
And then
Richard
I'll
Ward,
iron it, fold it,
Esquire,
and send it
Register.
off.
Mr. Jaleel Brinton, Provost Marshal.
I kind of like them.
Robert
They're pretty
Olinga,
freaking cool, man.
Esquire, was assigned by
This would
the
be a
court to
horrifying
counsel
sight
the
if you were a
prisoners
merchant on the
hereunder
sea
mentioned.
in the 18th century.
Prisoners' names, ages, place of birth. Charles Harris, Captain, 25, London. William Blatz, 28, Rhode Island. Daniel Hyde, 23, Virginia. Thomas Powell
Right?
Jr., 21,
That's how it goes.
Connecticut, New England. Stephen Munden, 20, London. Thomas Huggett, 30, London. William Reed, 35, Londonderry, Ireland.
God bless us
Peter
all,
Neves, 32, Exeter in Devon. James Brinkley, 28, Suffolk in England. Joseph Sound,
Easy.
28, City of Westminster. William Shutfield, 40, Lancaster in England. Edward Newton, 38,
Lancaster.
Wales. John Brown.
Why do they read the
29,
long
County
S as an F?
Edward
You
Lawson,
know it's a long
20,
S.
Isle of Man. Owen Rice, 27,
It's a long S,
South
dude.
Wales.
It is a long
Thomas
S.
Lannister,
Not an
21,
F.
Lancashire.
Not F. S.
Francis Layton,
Long
39, New York. John Waters, Quartermaster, 35, County of Devon. William Jones, 28, London. Charles Church, 21, St. Margaret's, Westminster. Thomas Hazel, 50. John Bright, 25. These 25 were
Dude,
found
these are
guilty
really,
and
really
executed on
cool.
the 19th of July, 1723,
Piracy!
Port in Rhode Island.
Okay,
John
So-
Brown, 17, Liverpool.
let's carry on,
Patrick Cunningham,
and we're going to finish these
25.
off, and then
These two were found guilty,
we're
but
done.
responded for 1 year and recommended to the king's favor. John Wilson, 23, New London County.
They're almost done, man.
Henry
These are
Barnes, 22,
cool.
Barbados. Thomas Jones, 17, Fleur in Wales. Joseph Switzer, 24, Boston in New England. Thomas Mumper, Indian, Mathers Vineyard, New England. John Hinscher, doctor, 22, near Edinburgh, Scotland. John Fletcher, 17. Thomas Child, 15. These 8 were found not guilty. The destroying this pirate was looked upon by the province to be of such signal service to the public and particular advantage to the colony of New York, that it was thought necessary to make some handsome acknowledgment to Captain Peter Solgaard for it, and therefore it was resolved in an assembly of the Common Council to compliment him with the freedom of their corporation. The resolution, together with the preamble of the captain's freedom, being
That's all you need,
curious
man.
in their kind,
That's it.
I
Let's go.
subjoin them for the satisfaction
Let's
of
finish
the
it
reader.
off. We're almost done. We've got
Resolution
4
of the
more to
Mayor
do,
and Common Council
so
of
let's
the
bang them
City
out.
of New York at a Common Council held at the City Hall
Bang
of
them
Cincinnati
out.
on Thursday, the 25th of July,
Taylor Swift, right?
Anno Domini, 1723.
Let's go for these
Present,
2.
Robert Walter, Esquire,
That one's
Mayor.
complete. This one's done.
This court having taken into their consideration the great
You know what?
service
It's
lately done to this
pretty
province
nice.
in particular,
Yeah.
as well
Let's
to all
lay
his
this
other
down and
majesty's
let's
good
go.
subjects in
So we're gonna
general,
go
by Captain
for
Peter Solgaard, commander of His Majesty's ship, the Greyhound.
the Greyhound. What a
ship of
lovely
the
name.
province, who lately in a cruise upon this coast, in due execution and discharge of his duties, upon intelligence given him, sought for, pursued, and engaged 2 pirate sloops, commanded by one Lowe, a notorious
Ned Lowe,
inhumane
that
pirate,
rat bastard.
one of which sloops he took after a resolute resistance, and very much shattered the other, who by the favor of night escaped. 26 of which pirates so taken, being lately executed at Rhode Island,
Huzzah!
not only eased this city and province of a very great trouble, but of very considerable expense, etc. It is therefore resolved, nemine contradicente, that this corporation do present the said Captain Solgaard with the freedom of this corporation, as a mark of the great esteem they have for his person, as well as for the aforesaid great and good services, and that the seal of the said freedom be enclosed in a gold box.
Oh, that
Mr.
sounds like a
Walker
lovely
and Mr.
gift.
Ridley do draw the draft of the said freedom, signifying therein the grateful sense of this corporation for so signal a service to the public, and benefit and advantage of mankind. That Alderman Kip and Alderman Kruger do prepare the said box, that the arms of the corporation be engraved on one side thereof, and a representation of the engagement on the other, with this motto.
I would love to see that box. Does it exist still? Perhaps it exists in some private collection somewhere. I would love to see
The
that.
town clerk caused the same freedom to be handsomely
I cannot
engrossed on
imagine
parchment, and that the whole
But that it
corporation
would
do
be
wait upon him to
protected and
present the
preserved
same.
by
order of the Common Council,
someone who
William
has the
Shirley's
sense to care for it.
The
I hope
preamble
so.
of Captain Peter Solgaard's copy of his freedom, Robert Walter, Esquire, Mayor, and the Alderman of
Right,
the
I
City
mean,
of New York.
What a beautiful box. That design just sounds
To all of these
wonderful.
persons shall come send greeting. Whereas Captain Peter Solgaard, commander of His Majesty's ship the Greyhound, the present station ship of this province, in his cruise, having intelligence of 2 pirate sloops of considerable force,
There you go.
in consort ship, under the command of one Lowe, a notorious pirate, that had for
That
upward
dirty
of 2
rat
years
Ned
committed
Lowe.
many depredations, murders, and barbarities
Yeah.
upon many of His Majesty's
That rat
subjects and
bastard
allies,
Ned Lowe.
lately come upon this coast, hath, with great diligence and
Oh,
utmost
sorry.
application,
Again, I've
pursued
not.
and overtaken, and after
You should be seeing the cool part,
resistance,
which is where I painted.
vanquished and
That's what you want to see. You don't need to see the top of my
taking
hat.
one and driving the other from our coast. Which action, as it is glorious in itself, so it is glorious in the public benefits and advantages that flow from it, to wit, the safety and freedom of our own trade and commerce, and of all the neighboring provinces on this continent. Such signal service done against the enemies of mankind merits the applause of all good men, but more immediately from those of this province, who are appointed his particular care and charge. We, therefore, the mayor, aldermen, and commonalty of the city of New York, assembled in common council to express our grateful sense and acknowledgement to the said Captain Peter Solgaard for so noble and faithful a discharge of his duty, and as a particular mark of the great esteem and just regard we bear to his kind acceptance of the freedom of the corporation of this city of New York, and that he will please to become a fellow citizen with us. These are therefore to
Move to New York. We love you.
Peter Solgaard is hereby admitted, received, and allowed a freeman and citizen of the said city of New York to have, hold, enjoy, and partake of all and singular advantages, benefits, liberties, privileges, franchises, freedoms, and immunities whatsoever.
What a
granted
wonderful,
belonging to the same city. In testimony
what a wonderful
thereof, the said
award.
mayor hath hereunto
I
subscribed
really
his
want to see that box,
and
dude.
caused
It has
the
an
seal of
illustration
said
of the
city to be
action,
affixed the 25th
the
day of
engraving.
July,
What
in
a
the 9th year of
beauty.
the reign of our sovereign Lord George, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith.
Wait, he's in charge of France too?
Anno Domini 1723.
That's kind of
William
ambitious,
Sharp as clerk, R. Walter Mayor.
right?
This narrow escape of
All right.
Lowe and his companions,
Did I do the
one
cheeks?
would have
Nay,
thought might have
not yet.
brought them to a little consideration of their black and horrid crimes, and to look upon this interval as an opportunity put into their hands by Providence to reconcile themselves to God by a hearty and sincere repentance. But
A
alas,
Laurel
they
and
repented
hearty
always,
handshake.
and had not so much as one spark of virtue to stir them up to be thankful for such an eminent deliverance. But instead thereof vented a million of oaths and curses upon the captain of the Greyhound, vowing to execute vengeance upon all they should meet with afterwards.
Rude.
The dignity he put upon them.
To the cheeks on this one. I think I missed the cheeks here.
Was a small sloop belonging
No,
to
actually, it
Nantucket,
looks like I got
whale
them.
fishing,
So there you
about
go.
80 miles from land.
Yep,
The
got 'em.
master of
Cool.
which, one Nathan Skiff, a brisk young fellow. The pirates cruelly whipped
So
Nathan
this one
on the
is
deck,
complete.
making his torture their sport. After which they
You
cut
rat
off
bastards.
his ears and last of all shot him through the head, and then sunk his vessel,
You
putting
rotten
the rest
sons
of
of
the
bitches.
hands into their whaleboat with a compass, a little water, and a few biscuits. And it being good weather, they
Biscuit being
providentially got
ship's
safe to
biscuit, which is
Nantucket beyond all
Like
expectation.
hardtack.
There
It's
was another
flour,
whaleboat
water, and
belonging
salt.
to this sloop last
Impossible
mentioned,
to
which
eat
happened
unless
to
it
be
is
some
soaked in
distance
coffee
from her.
or water
And
or
perceiving what was
broth.
doing, rowed with all speed to another
Not
sloop
terrible,
not far
but
off,
not
to acquaint her with the
delicious.
misfortune, that the men might take care
Basically
of themselves,
preserved
and she happily got away in
flour.
time. Some days after, Lowe took a fishing boat off of Block Island, but did not perpetrate
Block
so
Island
much
is New
cruelty
York,
to
yeah?
her, contenting
Is that
himself
right?
with only cutting off the master's head. But after taking 2 whaleboats near Rhode Island, he caused one of the master's bodies to be ripped up and his entrails to be taken out.
Ned
and
Lowe
cut
is
off
a
the
dick.
ears of the other,
I
and
don't
made
think
him
anybody
eat
has any
them
question
with
about
pepper and
that.
salt.
That guy's a
Which
jerk.
injunction he complied with without making a word. Several other persons he would have murdered.
Yeah, I don't think I like Ned Lowe.
Envy prevailing in the tender hearts of his companions, they refused to put his savage orders in execution. From the coast of New England, Lowe sailed directly for Newfoundland, and, near Cape Breton, took 2 or 3 and 20 French vessels, and one of them of 22 guns he manned with pirates, making a sort
You know,
of man of war
I think that's
of her,
it.
with
Now
which
just
he
do the
scoured the
teeth.
harbors and banks of Newfoundland,
Do
and
the
they took
teeth.
16 or 18 other ships and vessels, all which they plundered and some destroyed. Thus these inhumane wretches went on, who could not be contented to satisfy their avarice only, and travel in the common road of wickedness, but, like their patron, the devil, must make mischief their sport, cruelty their delight, and damning of souls their constant employment. Of all the piratical crews that were ever heard of, none of the Englishmen came up to this in barbarity. Their mirth and their anger had much the same effect, for both were usually gratified with the cries and groans of their prisoners, so that they almost as often murdered a man from the excess of good humor as out of passion and resentment, and the unfortunate could never be assured of safety from them, for danger lurked in their very smiles. An instance of this had likened to have happened to one Captain Graves, master of a Virginia ship last taken.
God bless you, Mr.
For as soon as
Graves.
he came aboard of the pirate, Lowe takes a bowl of punch in his hand and drinks to him, saying, "Captain Graves, here's half this to you." But the poor gentleman, being too sensibly touched at the misfortune of falling into his hands, modestly desired to be excused, for that he could not drink.
Drink.
Whereupon Lowe draws out a pistol, cocks it, and with the bull in the other hand,
Drink it, dude.
told him he should either take one or the other.
Oh, drink it.
So Graves, without hesitation, made choice of the vehicle that contained the punch.
Attaboy.
And gulped down about a quart when he had the least inclination that he had ever in his life to be merry. The latter end of July 1723, Lowe took a large ship.
Take the
called
drink, you
Christmas,
weirdo.
fitted her for a pirate, cut several ports in her, and mounted her with 34 guns. Lowe goes aboard of this ship, assumes the title of admiral, and hoists a black flag. With
Hoist the black flag!
At the main topmast head, and takes another voyage to the Western Islands, where he arrived at the beginning of September. The first vessel he met with there was a brigantine, formerly an English sloop, commanded by Elias Wilde, but lately bought by a Portuguese nobleman and altered. She was manned partly with English and partly Portuguese. The latter Lowe caused to be hanged by a way of reprisal for some of his own men sent thither in a sloop from the Cape de Verde Islands, as has been mentioned. The Englishmen he thrust into their own boat to shift for themselves and set fire to the vessel. At St. Michael's they sent in their boats and cut out of the road a new London-built ship of 14 guns commanded by Captain Thompson, who was taken there the year before by Lowe in the Rose Pink. The boats had fewer men than the ship, and Captain Thompson would have defended himself, but his men, through cowardice or too great an inclination of becoming pirates themselves, refused to stand by him, and he was obliged
They wouldn't
to
fight.
surrender. And when he came aboard, the pirate had his ears cut off close to his head for only proposing to resist Admiral Lowe's black flag. They gave him one of his own boats and burnt his ship. The next was a Portuguese bark that
I'm beginning to think that these pirates are not admirable fellows.
For they only cut them with their cutlashes out of wantonness and turned them all into their boat and set their vessel on fire. When the boat was going from the side of the ship, one of Lowe's men, who we may suppose was forced into his gang, was drinking with a silver tankard at one of the ports, and took his opportunity to drop into the boat among the Portuguese and lie down in the bottom in order to escape along with them. After he had stowed himself in the boat so as not to be seen, it came into his head that the tankard might prove of some use to him where he was going, so he got up again, laid hold of the utensil, and went off, without being discovered, in which attempt, had he failed, no doubt his life, if not the lives of all the people in the boat, would have paid for it. The name of this man is Richard Haynes.
Richard Haynes, you dingbat.
Tour to the Canaries, Cape de Verde Islands, and so to the coast of Guinea, but nothing extraordinary happened till they arrived near Sierra Leone in Africa, where they met with a ship called the Delight, Captain Hunt commander. This ship they thought fit for their own purpose, for she had been a small man-of-war and carried 12 guns. However, they mounted 16 on board her, manned her with 16
There you go.
men, and
We're done
appointed one Spriggs,
with that one.
who was then their quartermaster,
Right?
to be
Check
captain
both
of
sides.
her, who, 2 days
It's good.
after,
I'm going to
separated
paint
from the
this
admiral and went
as
to
I
the
thought
West Indies,
originally.
pirating
Let's
upon his own and
take this, and we're going to
particular
go right
company's
here.
account, where for the present we shall leave him.
There we shall go.
In
Right
January
there.
last, Lowe took a ship called the
That's what you
Squirrel,
got to do,
Captain Smith's.
because
But what became of him afterwards, I
ta-da,
can't tell. We
motherfucker.
have had no news concerning him come to England since this I have now mentioned. But I have heard that he talked of going to Brazil, and if so,
There you go.
it is likely we may too soon.
We're just
hear of
going
some
to do
exploit
touch-ups
together.
and
Though
awesome
the best
painting.
information we could
Because
receive
bad,
that he and
holy
all
shit,
his
I'm
crew
done.
were at the bottom of the sea.
Huzzah!
End of chapter 13, part 2. Recording by Kathleen Nelson, Austin, Texas,
I'm
May
done.
2010.
The pirate flags are complete. The piratical colors.
Chapter 14 of the General History of the Pirates.
Look
Volume
at
1.
these beauties.
This is a LibriVox recording.
Didn't
All
even
LibriVox
notice, but here
recordings
we
are
are.
in the public domain. For more information or to
You're on in.
volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.
These
Recording by Kate Mackenzie.
pirate flags.
General History of the Pirates.
Look
Volume
at
1
this,
by Charles
motherfuckers.
Johnson. Chapter 14 of Captain
Look.
John Evans and his crew.
At the
John
piratical
Evans was a
flags.
Welshman, had been formerly master of a sloop
These
belonging to
piratical
Evans, but
flags
losing his employ there,
are
he
complete.
sailed for some time out of
I'm a
Jamaica
happy, happy
as a mate.
artist.
3 or 4
They're
of his
terrifying
comrades, and wages not being so good as
and
formerly and
complete.
berths as scarce because of the great number of seamen, they agreed to go abroad in search of adventures. They sailed, or
Look
rather
at
rowed
that, man.
out of
They're
Port
cool,
Royal
they're
in
cool, they're
Jamaica,
cool.
the latter end of September 1722 in a canoe, and coming on the north side of the island, went ashore in the night, broke open a house or two, and robbed them of some money and everything else they could find that was portable. And
Okay,
brought them
what I
to
want to
on
do
board
now
the
is let
canoe.
these set up for a bit, and then I want to check over them
But this
and
kind
go
of robbery
for
did not
any
please someone.
corrections that must be
They
made, and
wanted
then
to get out to
they're
sea,
done, and then I
but
can
having
clean
a
up all of
vessel
my
with their
rags
canoe,
and
they were
paints and
prevented
stuff.
in their
But I
laudable
think
design.
these are
However, they kept a
they're
good
cool,
lookout
man. These
and
look
traversed
good.
the island in expectation that Providence would send some unfortunate vessel as a
They're
sacrifice.
terrifying,
And
right?
in a few days their
If
wishes
you
were
hoist
accomplished.
this,
For at
if you
Dunsmore,
hoisted this
they
upon
found a
your
small sloop
mizzen
at
mast,
anchor belonging to Bermudas.
what do
They
you
made
think
Bob
would
on
happen?
the way to board, and Evans
Look
informed
at
the
this.
folks that belonged to her that he was captain of the vessel, which was a piece of news that they knew not before. After they had put their affairs in a proper disposition aboard, they went ashore to a little village for refreshments and lived jovially the remaining part of the day at a tavern, spending 3 pistols, and then departed. The people of the house admired at the merry guests they had got, were mightily pleased. And
Oh, this is a
wished
great
them
story,
another time,
where they invite them back,
too soon for their profit.
and then they do.
In the middle of the night,
This is a wonderful story. I love this one.
the house and carried what
Perhaps my
they wanted
favorite.
aboard their sloop. The next day they weighed in the sloop, aboard of which they mounted 4 guns, called her the Scourer, and sailed to Hispaniola, on the north part of which island they took a Spanish sloop, which proved an extraordinary rich prize, as it fell among so few persons as this company consisted of, for they shared upwards of £150 a man. In pursuance of the game, and beating up for the Windward Islands, the Scourer met with a ship from New England, bound to Jamaica, 120 tons.
Voila, we're done.
Captain Diamond
We got good
Master
pirates.
of Puerto
Good
Rico.
pirate flags.
They plundered her and strengthened their own company by taking out the mate and 2 or 3 other men. They discharged the prize and run into one of the islands for fresh water and necessaries and stayed there some time. The next prize they made was the Lucretia and
These are cool as
Captain
fuck,
Mills
man.
of 200-ton burthen. They came up with her near the island Desader, January 11th. Upon seizing of this ship, the pirates began to take upon themselves the distribution of justice, examining the men concerning their master's usage of them, according to the custom of other pirates.
Check these
But
out.
the captain,
Need a
overhearing the
photograph?
matter, put an end to the judicial proceedings, and fell to rummaging the ship, saying to them, "What have we to do to turn reformers? 'Tis money we want." And speaking to the prisoners, he asked them, "Does your captain give you victuals enough?" And they answering in the affirmative, "Why then," said he ought to give you work enough. After the taking of this prize, they went to the little island of Avis, with a design to clean, and carried the Lucretia along with them, in order to heave down the Scourer by her. But, meeting there with the sloop, the pirate gave chase till the evening, when she was within gunshot of her, but, fearing to lose company with the Lucretia, who was a heavy sailor, they left off and saw her no more. This chase brought them to leeward of their port, so that they were obliged to look out for another place of retreat, and the island of Ruby not being far distant, they steered for that, and anchored there accordingly. But the next day, a Dutch sloop coming as it were into their mouths, they could not forbear dealing, and so making her their prize, they plundered her of what came, when shared, to £50 a man. They found this sloop more for their purpose than the Lucretia, to clean their own sloop by, as being much lower in the wast, and therefore capable of heaving her bottom farther out of the water, so she was discharged and a Dutchman kept in her room. But, not thinking it convenient to lay up here, for fear a discovery should be made, they turned their thoughts another way, and steered to the coast of Jamaica, where they took a sugar drover, and then run to the Grand Caymans, about 30 leagues to leeward of Jamaica, with intention to clean there. But an unhappy accident put an end to their piracies, which hitherto had proved very successful to them. The boatswain of the pirate being a noisy, surly fellow, the captain had at several times words with him, relating to his behaviour, who, thinking himself ill-treated, not only returned ill language, but also challenged the captain to fight him on the next shore they came to, with pistols and sword, as is the custom among these outlaws. When the sloop arrived, as above mentioned, the captain proposed the duel, but the cowardly boatswain refused to fight or go ashore, though it was his own challenge. When Captain Evans saw there was nothing to be done with him, he took his cane and gave him a hearty drubbing, but the boatswain, not being able to bear such an indignity, drew out a pistol and shot Evans through the head, so that he fell down dead. And the boatswain immediately jumped overboard and swam towards the shore, but the boat was quickly manned and sent after him, which took him up and brought him aboard. The death of the captain in that manner provoked all the crew, and they resolved the criminal should die by the most exquisite tortures. But while they were considering of the punishment, the gunner, transported with passion, discharged a pistol and shot him through the body, but not killing him outright, the delinquent, in very moving words, desired a week for repentance only. But another, stepping up to him, told him that he should repent and be damned to him, and without more ado, shot him dead. I should have observed that when the Lucretia and Catherine were suffered to go away, the pirates detained their mate, who was now the only man aboard who understood navigation, and him they desired to take upon him the command of the sloop in the room of Captain Evans, deceased. But he desired to be excused that honour, and at length positively refused it, so they agreed to break up the company and leave the mate in possession of the vessel. Accordingly, they went ashore at the Caymans, carrying with them about £9,000 among 30 persons, and, it being fair weather, the mate and a boy brought the vessel into Port Royal in Jamaica. End of chapter 14. Recording by Kate Mackenzie. Chapter 15 of the General History of the Pirates, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Catherine. The General History of the Pirates, Volume 1 by Charles Johnson. Chapter 15 of Captain John Phillips and his crew. John Phillips was bred a carpenter, and sailing to Newfoundland in a West Country ship, was taken by Anstis in the Good Fortune brigantine, the next day after he had left his consort and commodore, Captain Roberts. Phillips was soon reconciled to the life of a pirate, and being a brisk fellow, was appointed carpenter of the vessel, for at first his ambition reached no higher. There he remained till they broke up at Tobago, and was one of those who came home in a sloop that we have mentioned to be sunk in Bristol Channel. His stay was not long in England, for whilst he was paying his first visits to his friends in Devonshire, he heard of the misfortune of some of his companions, that is, of their being taken and committed to Bristol jail, and there being good reason for his apprehending danger from a wind that blew from the same quarter. He moved off immediately to Topsham, the nearest port, and then shipped himself with one Captain Wadham for a voyage to Newfoundland and
wash
home
them
again,
with a little bit of
which,
dye
by the
when
way,
they're dry.
Mr. Phillips never designed to perform
Wash them and
or
hang
to
them.
see England anymore.
Hey,
When the ship came to
I just
Peter
finished my
Harbor,
flags.
Newfoundland
I think they're
aforesaid,
beautiful.
he ran away from
So
them
tomorrow
and
I'm
hired
going to
himself a
wash them,
splitter in the fishery for the season.
shoot them
But this
through with
was
a
all
musket,
until he could have an
sign them,
opportunity of
and we're done.
prosecuting his intended road
Thank you for
race,
joining me.
in order to
I'm
which
glad you were
he
here,
combined with
and I
several
hope you get
others
something
in the
useful out
same
of this.
employ
Any questions, put
to
them in
go
the
off with
comments.
one of
I'll
the vessels
endeavor
that
to
lay in
answer
the
any
harbor
questions you
upon
got,
a piratical account.
and
Accordingly, the time was fixed,
fair winds.
viz. the 29th of August, 1728.